welcome once again to another edition of the TCD podcast, joined as always by the Lunchbox Legends. We're off to a flyer. Voice of Reason, Adam J, Sexual Chocolate, Varun Prasad. How are we, guys?
Hello, hello.
It's good to see you.
Hey guys.
What's new? What's been going on?
Oh, where do I start?
Where do you start?
Actually, I won't start anywhere because we've got a podcast to get through.
We've got a podcast to get through. The Voice of Reason, Adam J. How's the new place working out, mate?
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah?
Yeah, partying it up.
Partying it up.
That's right.
You're in a particular part of Sydney they refer to as the Shire, are you not?
Yes, I am, yeah.
See, they don't even consider themselves to be part of Sydney in the Shire, do they?
Well, I don't know. Well, I don't really care what they think.
You don't care what they think?
They're the self-proclaimed God's country, I think they call it.
God's
the Shire.
country.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Lovely. Varun Prasad, what's caught your eye in the political world this week? Anything from the get-go? We're going to start with Australia, obviously, the new Prime Minister.
Well, there you go, yeah.
Well, can I just, before we get too far into it, I just want to thank all the guys for joining us in the chat in Periscope. Good to see you. If you want to catch up with the podcast, I better start the recording, by the way. If you want to catch up with the podcast, you can do so on iTunes. Have you got earphone?
I don't know.
You've got to turn the volume up there. There's a little...
Thank you.
A bit better? You can hear it now?
No, not really. But that's okay.
I can't hear it now. Okay. How's that? Better?
Yeah.
Okay. You're just saying that, aren't you?
Yes.
There's a volume switch on there.
No, it is. It's fine. No, it's all good.
It's all good?
Yeah, it is.
Okay. How are your cans? Okay.
It was great till whatever you did.
How about now?
It's only coming through the one, but that's all right. I can hear you.
Okay. Let me adjust it a little bit. Still just the one?
Oh, there you go. That's better.
Okay,
Yeah.
beautiful. There you go. All right, well, we may as well get straight into it. You can catch the podcast on iTunes, The Common Discourse. Just look for that in iTunes. We'll try our best to keep up with the chat. It has been a long time. It's been a month. A lot's happened. We've got a lot to get through. But first of all, the new Prime Minister that nobody ever elected. Let's go to Australia first. So obviously there was a leadership spill brought on by one Peter Dutton, who is from the Conservative faction of the Liberal Party, Queensland MP guys. And it's kind of like, imagine if you were building a science experiment, for example, in high school, and you've done like 99% of the work, and then one of your team members comes in at the last minute and slaps on one sticker and then presents it and wins the prize for the best science experiment. So he did all the legwork, didn't he, in getting rid of Malcolm Turnbull. He's the one who jumped out of the trench first, took all the bullets in the chest, and then Scott Morrison just climbs over the top and says, "Oh, I'm going to be the new Prime Minister now." What are your initial thoughts about all that?
Oh, one of the great, I guess, strategic moves by a politician that I've seen for a while. That's what I think. Peter Dutton was touted as the new leader, and he had a bit of a momentum, but he just got completely outdone in the 4D chess game.
He did,
and going to be thinking about it for a long, long time before he decides to make another move.
Well, he may not even get another opportunity.
That's right. So it was quite amazing. Like, Peter Dutton, he's had a lot of popular things to say. I guess that's the first point to say. And out of nowhere, he's been left looking like an amateur.
Sure.
Really, in the high stake political games that a lot of these politicians play. I mean, he just got pushed out. I mean, right at the end, and it was stunning. I didn't expect it. There was talk about Scott Morrison running right at the end there, and even Julie Bishop.
Julie Bishop put a hand up.
It was like, oh well, surely. Peter Dutton's done enough of the groundwork here to get over the line. He even had dinner with his family at a restaurant.
Oh dear.
And at the same time, Scott Morrison was making calls. He was on the phone.
Yep.
And so
he's pretty famous for his ability behind closed doors, I think. Scott Morrison for getting numbers for a particular vote. You remember when Tony Abbott was removed on Scott Morrison himself voted to retain Tony Abbott, but apparently directed his people to vote for Malcolm Turnbull instead, hedging his bets, right? And that's the thing. I like, just as a general comment. I think the Liberal Party's best chance of retaining government at the next election was with Peter Dutton, because you've got over 1 million votes that have gone to third parties on the right. And the best way to bring those votes back, I think you're going to have a better chance of getting those votes back to the Liberal Party than you are going to get more people from the quote-unquote middle ground which is, more in favour of Labor anyway. So that was my thinking. And Scott Morrison, for all his conservative credentials, the conservative Christian, did a lot of work, good work with the immigration policy when he had that, turning the boats back and stuff, closing, getting people out of the detention centres. For all the good work he did there, I think he burned a lot of that capital with his move against Tony Abbott when Tony Abbott was removed. So, what are your predictions for the Scott Morrison prime ministership? Do you think the Liberal Party can retain government at this point, or is it just like a Titanic?
Well, it's a difficult one. I was, quite frankly, expecting Peter Dutton to take this one out. The thing with the Liberal Party right now, I'd say the main split that has occurred in the Liberal Party, I always thought was over climate change, right? And what makes this so sort of difficult to decipher, we had Josh Frydenberg, right, who was the climate change expert under Malcolm Turnbull, and he wanted to keep us in Paris. He's the one who sent $4.4 million
Correct.
down to, the Great Barrier Reef, the 10 scientists who were, going to use that to fight climate change. $4.4 million is a lot of money for a group of 10 people.
Certainly is.
He's now the Deputy Prime Minister, or he's the Treasurer now. So it's going to be difficult to kind of justify his position, because was Josh Frydenberg lying then, or is he going to be lying now? Because now
politicians, when are they not?
Exactly. But it's a catch-22 situation. But the other day we had Angus Taylor, who's now the Energy Minister,
correct,
come out and speak about coal. Pretty much, or
he's
at least referring to coal.
Angus Taylor.
Yeah, he's a conservative, and his main priority, he said, is to focus in on coal and getting those energy prices down. And that kind of then you kind of as soon as he says that, I'm sure a lot of eyes turn to Josh Frydenberg, kind of sideways glance. Okay, so where are you sitting with this? After so many years of supporting Malcolm Turnbull against climate change.
Well, I think one of the first things Scott Morrison did was remove the climate targets part of the energy portfolio and put that on the Environment Minister. And that can be viewed a couple of ways. Like, is he protecting the Energy Minister with something like that? Because, people, you don't even have to be conservative or left-wing to identify that for the Liberal Party, for the coalition, the climate target part of their policy platform is absolutely toxic. It's cancer. Like, the Liberal Party base do not want overt, over-the-top green energy targets, do they?
Oh, well, they don't, because on one hand, if you're running a business, this increases your costs.
Absolutely.
And if you're just, a normal person living in a house.
What about the pensioners?
That's right. And you're paying electricity bills, then, of course, prices will go up. So a large
section of the Conservative base are the older Australians, are they not?
That's right. And, who does this policy benefit? Well, this policy benefits the health of the planet in some
abstract way.
In some abstract way, which people don't give a fuck about.
Yeah.
And I mean, let's put it, bluntly.
Well, if you're talking about putting things bluntly, it does not affect the health of the planet at all, because we are not big emitters as a nation. So all of it is just empty tokenism, and when it's tokenism, it's got no substance behind it. It's just symbolism. It's brittle, so it's easily broken.
Yeah.
Well, see, this is the problem with the energy targets, right? This is another reason why so many Liberal Party voters, traditional Liberal Party voters, are moving further to the right. Because for all the talk of, we need to do this to save the planet, I think it's fair to say that if you think that, the Australian government forcing its population, when the Australian country has, some of the richest reserves of, fuel in terms of coal and uranium, and we're not even allowed to talk about nuclear power, which is the most ridiculous thing. But if you think that the Australian government forcing its citizens to pay 3 times the amount that Americans pay for energy is going to inspire other countries around the world somehow that they should do the exact same thing, with the objective results of the government doing it on the brink of being basically eviscerated at the next election, you must have your head up your own arse at that point to think that that's a viable strategy going forward. The other problem is you have to have a point of difference between yourself and the opposition. When Malcolm Turnbull was the opposition leader, when was it, back in 2009? He was one of the most unpopular opposition leaders of all time. The reason was the energy portfolio, and he backed the Labor Party in a green energy climate change taxation fund.
It was a CPRS back
the
then?
CPRS.
That's right. Yep.
So because he refused to differentiate himself on that policy, that's what led to his removal by one Tony Abbott, who said, we're not going to go in with all this green energy garbage, right?
Yep.
And so, fuck me dead, he gets into the prime ministership and he does the exact same shit again, and it sinks him again.
Yep.
Like, maybe he might be one of the smartest guys on earth, but he's obviously got very poor political instincts, which is probably what we knew.
Yeah, well,
from the
that's
beginning.
hardly surprising, really, is it? Malcolm Turnbull is Malcolm Turnbull.
He is.
He can go back to now...
Banking.
Yeah, well, and being on panels of various state-run...
Unelected panels.
Yeah, panels talking about, how good of a bloke he is, the virtual signalling, the moral preening, in a leather jacket, let's not forget, because that's very, very important, as Paul Manafort, for example, knows.
We'll get to America later on.
So, the problem with Malcolm Turnbull was that he tried to cater to everyone, and at the end of the day, when other groups started attacking him, he had no defenders. He had no one out there is crying because Malcolm Turnbull lost the leadership, and he's just just
maybe
irrelevant.
elements of the mainstream press.
Yeah,
But
that's about it.
I think he really showed his true colours, in those last couple of days last week.
Oh, yeah. Did you see that press conference? What a train wreck that
It
was.
was an absolute train wreck. And, wanting to know exactly who's voting for who. I mean, he's breaking convention. He's, he wanted 43 signatures, and that's
He got the job by getting 2 signatures.
Absolutely. And, he's saying there's a dark force that's, trying to remove me. Well, hang on a second, Malcolm Turnbull. You did exactly the same thing.
That's the thing that I find like the most satisfying out of all this. And obviously, I don't like seeing prime ministers being removed without elections. I think that I'm not for changing the rules in order to make that a thing. But the Constitution is the Constitution, right? The leader of the party is the prime minister. The people don't elect a prime minister; they elect a party. Through electing their local members. That's the way it should stay. But the most satisfying part about all this, even though I don't like the situation of prime ministers being removed without elections, is the very fact that Malcolm Turnbull came out and blamed the media when we know for a fact he himself was the one that was instigating the destabilisation campaign against Tony Abbott in the first place by leaking to the media and undermining him on shows like Q&A on the ABC.
Yeah.
Every opportunity he had, he went on TV and did the exact opposite of what the Prime Minister's narrative was.
Yeah. Look,
And so he brought on, and then he just happened to be the saviour. Like, I should be Prime Minister instead. It's like, yeah, please.
If anything, Tony Abbott, dulled this down.
Yep.
I mean, Tony Abbott wasn't as active, going on conservative radio shows in particular, which are massive here in Australia.
Yes.
Constantly undermining Malcolm Turnbull. Now, he might have been doing that in the background. Okay, fair enough. And but he wasn't so open about it as Malcolm Turnbull was. I mean, he was overt. Malcolm Turnbull was totally overt about it, and suck shit to him.
Well, out with the old and in with the new. I got this article today, guys. Scott Morrison at centre of ABC row over religion. Here we go again, right? Those evil Christians. Oh, there's supposed to be a separation of church and state.
Is he the first Hillsong Prime Minister?
He's not Hillsong.
John Howard.
He's not Hillsong.
John Howard was Hillsong. I'm not sure if
No, really?
No, ScoMo isn't Hillsong. Australia's new Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, is at the centre of a row over his deeply held religious beliefs. How dare he? The Pentecostal PM, whose faith is causing some concern.
Even worse.
You see, but you're a Catholic, right? let's not have another sectarian bloodbath here in this studio today if we can avoid it. Was lambasted on the ABC show Tonightly on Monday, triggering fierce debate on social media. See, this is my first issue with that very first paragraph. Apparently there's a row over his religious beliefs. What do we point to as evidence of this row? Debate on social media. It's like, yeah, please. Please. The TV satire program, which recently was cancelled by the ABC. skewered Mr. Morrison over the perceived contradiction between his religious beliefs and his controversial actions as immigration minister. You know what I really enjoy in life is when you have overtly angry atheist types using the Bible to argue against Christians. Isn't that just wonderful? Like, that fills me with joy when that happens. It's like, hang on, you're a Christian. You're supposed to believe in this.
There we go with the identity politics.
Identity politics.
Well,
that's
couldn't
right.
you just attack them with, well, you're not a Christian, so...
Yeah, so what the fuck are you talking about?
So, yeah.
Host Tom Ballard referenced the leader's congregation where worshippers are sometimes so overcome they start to speak in tongues. Quote, to show us how our new PM's faith fits with his politics, we've actually managed to get some Christian rock musicians who regularly perform at Morrison's church. Of course, they weren't Christian rock musicians. This was a comedy team, and they went on to give some of these inspiring lines from the song.
Disgusting, yeah.
We've got some lyrics. Jesus made the animals like kangaroos. He also said to lock the kids up on Nauru. I am Jesus' son. I am Jesus' daughter. There's nothing more Christian than closing the borders. Yeah. So, here's my initial thoughts, and then we'll go to you guys. I tend to think that we are now there's always been this thing like we're always a few years behind Europe and the US, right? And you know what happens in those parts of the world to a degree, to a factor. There's a cultural influence in Australia, right? It's not 100%. But it's, what percentage it is, I don't know. It's pretty subjective. But definitely the cultural trends in other parts of the world and the political trends in other parts of the world do filter down to us at some level, I think, because we're part of the English-speaking world, right?
The Anglosphere.
The Anglosphere. And what I've noted more specifically in the US, but definitely beginning to happen in Europe, is people are more willing now to say proudly, like, I'm a Christian and this is what I think. And, we've spoken about it before, haven't we? It's like this rise in like Christian pride that we've been seeing, which for a long time was like, oh, no, shun. But then also the skepticism of the mainstream media. So articles like that, which are like clear hack jobs, and that particular performance on the ABC, which is the Australian taxpayer-funded media outlet, basically just, shitting on 65% of the Australian population is Christian, through the census that we take.
Yep.
Shitting on 65% of the Australian population, basically making a mockery of their views and their deeply held spiritual beliefs and stuff. I think people are more willing now to go, you know what, and just like stick the finger up. So I think Scott Morrison's in a pretty good position in this era, in this zeitgeist, to actually not allow this to be detrimental to his image, but rather a positive. What do you think?
Well, I'd say the silliest thing about that performance by those two, so-called Christian...
Do you want to watch a bit of it? Do you want to see
put it on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's up to you.
I've seen it, but yeah, put it on for the viewers.
Okay. Let's play.
So it was going down in Australia.
See what's happening down under.
Now, you may know, Pentecostal churches, they get pretty energetic when they worship, really get into it. Morrison's pastor told Fairfax the church is a bit more upbeat, a bit more up-tempo than a traditional church with a lot more musicians. Well, to show us how our new PM's faith fits in with his politics, we've actually managed to get some Christian rock musicians who regularly perform at Morrison's church here tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Shadow Ministers.
Hey guys! Hello! Hey guys, we are the Shadow Ministers.
Yeah.
I am Bridie.
Hi guys, I'm Wyatt, and there's a third member of our band, and that's Jesus.
Guys, since Scott Morrison became Prime Minister, heaps of people have been talking about his evangelical faith.
Yeah, and if you don't know what that means, we're here to explain. It means ScoMo is heaps Christian.
Scott Morrison could
I can't
not
imagine
be
why
more
the show got
Christian,
cancelled,
right?
to
Every
be honest.
act he does is so Christian.
2, 3, 4.
Jesus made the animals like kangaroos, and he also said to lock the kids up on Nauru.
I am Jesus' son.
And I'm Jesus' daughter, and there's nothing more Christian than closing the borders.
We love Jesus,
Jesus, but not refugees. If you want
It is pretty catchy, to be fair.
You've got to stop boats.
To do what pleases Jesus, deny them all visas, and you can't get more Christian than that.
Suffer little children and come unto me. The government takes that doctrine literally. ScoMo is under the spell of Jesus' charm, and kids are under safety watch for self-harm.
We love Jesus.
Okay, that's enough. It's pretty bomby. Like it's not particularly. It's not like outrageously funny. But I don't find it offensive. I find it a bit dumb. You know.
Yeah, like I'm not.
Well, it's a bit cringy, you know. But my point here is, okay, we saw what happened. Actually, I'll come back to the gay marriage vote, but if you look at ABC, I mean, obviously they're just completely overtaken by almost radical left sort of point of views.
The Ultimo perspective.
Yeah.
Ultimo is a suburb in Sydney, for those who aren't aware, which is like very
yeah.
a lot of uni students and greenies and trendies. So
latte sipping,
sippers,
champagne socialists. Yeah. But what I was going to say is, they sort of equate Judeo-Christian values and traditions with whites, right? Okay. But they completely ignore the fact that a lot of the sort of immigrant communities in Australia are Christian.
Yeah, that's true.
So in a way, they're isolating them, by kind of making fun of their long-held beliefs.
Sure.
Their traditions. So on the one hand, they're trying to
sorry to interrupt. There's a great comment in the chat from Katie Borland who says there are borders in the Bible. Which is true. Fantastic. There you go.
Yeah, but I mean, on the one hand, they're saying, we're all for multiculturalism, we're all for diversity and all that, but those same groups that you're catering to, you're kind of actually, knocking them down by attacking their Christian beliefs, right? And the same thing we saw with the gay marriage vote, right?
That's right.
What was the biggest vote in New South Wales?
Western Sydney.
Yeah, it was Western Sydney.
Highest immigrant area.
65% voted against it.
Yep.
It was all the immigrant communities,
Yeah.
the very people they sort of pander to.
And it was all the Labor run seats. So it was all the lefties who pretend like, all of the immigrants are in favour of gay marriage in their own electorates. It was actually the people voting against it, which put them in a very precarious position politically.
Absolutely.
To go against what their electorate actually wants. Adam J., are you ashamed? Are you ashamed to be a Catholic at this point?
No. I'm not offended by that video at all.
No.
I mean, like, go hard.
Yeah,
go hard.
Yeah.
Like, I mean,
free speech, baby.
Yeah, I mean, and the problems really start where, okay, I've got a sense of humor, and you can pay out on all these different on Christianity or on Catholicism or whatever,
or Islam, even if you want.
That's where I was getting to. That if someone produced a comedy sketch type thing like that with Islam as the main subject, then I mean,
World War III.
I don't know. I think Ultimo would actually crack and just like massive sinkhole would just like fall into
the earth,
and magma will start spurting out.
Well, you wouldn't even need a comedy skit. We have objective real world evidence of, say, the Danish cartoon scandal from a few years ago, guys, where that caused riots and nuns to be beheaded in all parts of the world, and embassies were burnt to the ground.
There was that video made by the Coptic Christian person, which apparently caused riots all around the world, and Sydney wasn't immune to that. We remember the big riots in
Hyde
Sydney
Park
a few years ago.
That's
over
right.
That video.
One of the signs being held aloft was, I believe, behead those who insult the prophet.
Yeah, that's right.
Yep.
That's right. So, I mean, is it cowardice? What is it?
What I was getting to was that's the problem. I mean, let's pay out on all religions. Let's have a sense of humor about it. Of course, let's not go overboard. I mean, there's a difference between being disrespectful and just having a laugh, having a sense of humor.
Yep.
But why, when a lot of people look at this, they think, okay, there's a standard here for Christianity. What? And, there's a different standard for different religions, especially Islam, which is somehow just has like, a kind of protection around it that is weird. And then they go to the ballot box and they go, well, fuck you. And they vote, for your Pauline Hansons and all that. And that's a huge problem. And that's a question that needs to be thrown to your ABCs, to the ABC, the Australian Broadcasting Network here in Australia. I mean, okay, let's pay out on everyone. And that's just not getting through. They don't get it. They don't understand it.
I mean, it's been a fair number of years since I've watched ABC on a regular basis. But has that question, are you guys aware if that question's ever been brought up in an ABC show like Q&A or something? Like, why can't we apply the same standards across the board to all religions?
I think the only time you hear Islam mentioned on Q&A, everyone, to be honest, is when they're accusing some Christian conservative of being Islamophobic.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a sad reality.
Yeah, it is. It's just ridiculous. I mean, we've put politics and culture, we've brought it down to such a level that it's completely dividing the nation over absolute stupidity.
Okay, well, just one more article to go over for the Australian stuff, guys. Sure. Julie Bishop. You remember Shanghai Sam Dastiari? Mm-hmm. This was a guy for our American listeners who was caught not taking payments, but having things paid for him by the Chinese government, if we can put it that way.
Did you hear it? Did you see that article about him coming out and saying that he was hard into the drugs and stuff like that?
No, I didn't know.
Yeah. I saw that.
Well, that's surprising.
I was young.
But, I think his best contribution to Australian politics was this line about Julie Bishop, where he said a nuclear bomb could hit Canberra and Julie Bishop would emerge from the rubble as deputy leader. I think that's the best thing that Sam Dastiari ever did. So she obviously had her eyes on the prize as well, Prime Minister. Unbelievable conflict. Julie Bishop says she was the victim of a Liberal factional feud. This is a quote from Julie Bishop. I'm sure someone else could say, she said, adding to that she got caught up in it, an unbelievable conflict between the left and the right of my party. Bishop, who will stay in Parliament on the backbench as a member of the for the Perth seat of Curtin, expressed surprise that none of the 11 federal MPs from WA voted for her in the leadership spill on the 24th of August. She was knocked out in the first round of voting. It surprised me, she said. I always believed West Australians had a responsibility to look out for the interests of this state. There certainly is a Queensland influence, no question. So she believes that the Western Australians should have looked out for their state by electing her as Prime Minister, and she's clearly unelectable in a future election. I'm really glad that Julie Bishop didn't get elected, because I remember when she was over in China as the Foreign Minister, and her contribution to the Foreign Minister portfolio was to put out on Twitter, I'm having a great time here with our brand new friends in China, and like tweeting little Chinese flags and stuff. And I'm like, well, this is high school girl stuff.
Yeah, she's a female Kevin Rudd, really.
Yep.
I mean,
sorry, it's no wonder that Western Australians weren't very eager to vote for her, because she was a Malcolm Turnbull 2.0 pretty much, when it comes to her policies, and we all know Western Australia did not like Malcolm Turnbull, especially over the GST row and all that from last year. Remember, I think we actually did a podcast on that, the redistribution of taxes, and Western Australia was getting a short end of the stick.
That's right.
And they just looked at Julie Bishop and go, well, she's exactly like Malcolm Turnbull. Why would we support her?
Exactly.
Well, she was always the number 2 woman. I mean, I was going to say man there, but she's obviously not one. Number 2 woman, and she was deputy leader for a lot of leaders that had bounced around. Mm-hmm. But what she was a career traveller.
Yep.
Let's go to New York. Let's go to the headquarters of the United Nations. Flyer. Let's go to China. Let's go here. Let's go there. And the foreign minister always here in Australia is, even Alexander Downer had this syndrome that Australian foreign ministers always seem to get, that they just go around. The junket life, the going around and, Australia's great. Yeah, you're Australian. That's fantastic. And yeah, here's a few cameras there and, let's take some snaps.
Happy snaps with the Clintons.
Yeah, happy snaps with the Clintons and exchange some business cards and whatnot. And that's it. That's and she did a decent job, I guess, being Australia's representative overseas. You know? But she was nothing more than that. She was never leader.
No. Yeah. Never leadership.
She got crushed by the patriarchy.
She got crushed by the patriarchy.
It reminds me of that scene in Wizard of Oz when the house drops and you just see the feet of the witch sticking out.
Fantastic. All right, a little bit of UK news, guys. Let's go. Pardon me. Some may be saying it's about time for this one. But is this fake news? Once again, Brexit deal within sight, says the UK Secretary. Brexit Secretary Dominic Raab has said he's, quote, confident that a deal is within our sights while appearing before peers to discuss the progress of Britain's negotiations to leave the EU. Mr Raab answered questions for almost 2 hours from members of the Lords EU Committee in Parliament over the UK's exit from the European Union. The Cabinet Minister said he had quickly established, quote, a good professional and personal rapport with the EU's chief negotiator, Michel Barnier, Barnier, but he later hinted that the timing of the Brexit talks this autumn may change. Mr. Barnier told reporters in Berlin after a meeting with the German Foreign Minister Heiko Maas, quote, "We are prepared to offer Britain a partnership such as there has never been with any other third country." Ads, it's fair to say that you've been pretty sceptical of the whole Brexit, goings on from beginning to end, and the people obviously aren't going to get what they expected from the Brexit vote. And do you think now we're at a...
Well, just to cut you off there.
Go ahead.
People didn't know what they wanted. I mean that's an important point. They didn't know. I mean, you can even look at the Google searches following the
What
Brexit.
is Brexit?
What is Brexit?
What is the EU?
What is the EU?
Yeah, what is the EU? What does the EU do for me? I mean, or doesn't do for me?
Sure.
So I think that's one thing to remember. Will Brexit happen? Like a clean cut where Britain...
The quote-unquote hard Brexit?
Hard Brexit. There's a hard Brexit and then there's a negotiation with the EU for a new trade deal or for bilateral deals with these countries, which is a very difficult thing because, the EU negotiates as a bloc.
Yep. For the benefit of Germany, more often than not.
Well, we already saw that Theresa May, the meeting that she had, a couple of months ago, it was very much on the side of soft Brexit, and we've actually got Nigel Farage now who's come back into the fight, right?
Has he?
Yeah, he's come back into the fight now. He's gonna, Nigel Farage, he's the one who spearheaded the whole movement, right?
Basically, yeah.
And so
He was definitely the figurehead.
Yeah, he was the figure. Well, I would say he spearheaded the whole movement. I mean, his performances
for the last 20 years,
in the EU Parliament were just absolute joys to watch.
Yep.
But the thing is, if he's coming back into the fight after saying, I'll quit politics once the Brexit deal has happened, that just goes to show that people are not confident in the Brexit movement. I mean, Brexit was supposed to be Brexit. Once the referendum happened, it turned into, is it going to be soft Brexit or is it going to be hard Brexit?
Yep.
And no, there should be just one Brexit, and that Brexit, it translates into today's language as a hard Brexit.
Yep.
That's what it should have been from the beginning.
Yep.
And that's why Nigel Farage is back in the game, because he knows Theresa May is not the person to do it.
I think it's interesting Trump's role here as President of the United States. I think he's in a good position to provide some level of confidence to the British Parliament and say, look, if you don't worry about trade, like we're still going to be really, big trade partners here. And I'm sure he presented options to Theresa May to say, well, if you're going to get stiffed on various parts of your economy coming out of the EU, I'm sure the US would be more than happy to negotiate.
I'm sure the US would be.
I'm sure we've got a solution that can meet your needs. Like you're more the trade guy here.
Well, just a comment about what you just said.
Okay.
I mean, Britain in the EU it negotiates in an equal position. I mean, Britain can stand up to Germany or France. It negotiates as an equal with these countries, with these big, Western European, old Europe countries in particular. A relationship between Great Britain and the United States is completely different.
Sure.
United States is top dog. Mm-hmm. And while, sure, Great Britain is, its oldest ally, it's certainly not like a scenario, for example, that Mexico's in. But certainly, Great Britain can't push for a great deal. And that's one thing to remember here. It's not just Americans that want a great deal on all these trade deals. There's internal domestic politics happening in Britain where, the population wants a great deal with America. Now, they're not in a strong position in a two-way negotiation when it comes down to that. So, of course, Americans say, if talks break down, if you want to clean cut with the EU, and then we'll kind of, bail you out.
A comment in the chat from Kimmy says Obama threatened to put them in the back of the line if they voted for Brexit. Do you remember that?
Yep.
Yes.
Barack Obama. So that's a clear differentiation then, isn't it, between the way Donald Trump's approached it? Because he was pro-Brexit, wasn't he?
Yeah, he
more
was,
or less.
Because he wants to cleave Britain off and have a free trade agreement with the United Kingdom. Of course.
I would slightly disagree with one aspect of what you just said there, Adam, and that's that. Okay, America would probably be the bigger player in the trade deal, but I wouldn't put it to the point where it's a top dog because, you know, the City of London is actually probably the strongest financial powerhouse still in the world today. And I'm not talking about London. I mean the City of London, which is the financial.
New York might have something to say about that.
Yeah.
No. They're almost on equal par with New York. The City of London, I mean, they run a lot of the
Los
financial
Angeles?
trades in the world. No, Los Angeles doesn't come up towards. I'm talking about financial trades here. I'm talking about
Wall Street.
fluid money, Wall Street.
What's the London one called again?
The footsie.
The FTSE,
yeah.
is it?
Yeah, but definitely City of London holds a lot of sway in financial markets around the world. In fact, I would almost say it's on equal par with New York.
Yeah, it does. And you know, let's remember what Brexit was. Brexit wasn't, you know, a revolution of financial workers that have got a raw deal out of, you know,
what happened. Blue collar types.
It was the blue collar types.
Yeah, it was the blue collar
So-
types. Okay, that's the okay. We can look at that and we can say, okay, you know, goods and services, fair enough. But it always comes down to the financial markets. You know, the people who control the levers in financial markets, they control a lot of the power.
I'm not saying anything. But there's interesting, you know, for example, the automotive market, which is an interesting one. I mean, Britain has obviously a pretty strong motor vehicle.
German cars.
But yes, they still got some, you know, some home-built cars, which are fucking
Aston Martin,
Aston
Jaguar.
Martins and all them. And, you know, this is another thing about access, you know, whether or not the motor vehicle companies of America have access to Great Britain markets and what the tariffs are. And
Well,
this
we
is
know
all-
it's ridiculous for to import an American car.
Yeah,
Like the price is ridiculous, right?
it is, yeah.
Yeah. That's some interesting stuff. Anything to close off on Europe before we take a break and then hit America? No?
Doesn't look like
okay,
it.
well, I'll take that as a no. We'll take a very short break. We'll be back in a couple of minutes and then we'll discuss American politics.
Aloha, James R. here. When I'm not in court defending the boys from the starting block against slander charges. Alleged! Yes, alleged. I'm hosting Trust and Verify with Boogie Bumper every Sunday night at 1 a.m. on TAVshow.com. Join us and all your favorite broadcasters there.
TAVshow.com.
Friend and foe alike, join me, Varun Prasad, every week on the Common Discourse Weekly Roundup podcast. You can follow the show on @TCD Tweet on Twitter and Periscope. Subscribe to the show on YouTube, Stream Me, iTunes, or your preferred podcast platform. If you like what you hear, or you would like to express your raging discontent, please consider leaving us a review. The Common Discourse, independent political opinion, thought, and analysis for the people, by the people.
Do you lie awake at night pondering life's big questions? Is there a God? What is the meaning of life? How would one do an hour-long sports show without ever actually talking about sport? If yes, we can help you answer 33% of these pressing questions. All you have to do is check out the starting block on TAVshow.com, Periscope, Stream Me, or YouTube, Wednesday mornings at 3 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can also download the podcast on iTunes just by searching for The Starting Block in the store or at thestartingblock.podbean.com. Or if you're really desperate for answers, why not check us out on Twitter at The Starting Block. No K at the end, don't forget to drop that K. Enlightenment is now only a click away.
Now that is a freaking awesome commercial.
And we're back, as you can see, looking at an empty room. I said to the guys it's going to be a 2-minute break, and off they went, and they are nowhere to be seen. So, completely unprofessional. Good job, lads. Thanks for your help. Thanks for joining in. I'll address a couple of comments in the chat while we're waiting for these jokers. Yeah, welcome back to the podcast, Varun. We're actually live.
Oh, we're sorry.
The USA has renegotiated almost all trade deals via Trump, says James, and yet USA hasn't dominated anyone. The plan is to be fair, not crush the little guy.
That's a pretty fair comment.
That is a fair comment, yeah. By the way, Kimmy wanted to say how much she enjoyed your last podcast, which I believe was the plight of identity in the West.
Well, thank you very much.
So looking forward
That
to
was
another
great.
one of
There's,
those.
There's a lot more
There's
of
a lot
those
more
ideas that I wanted to put forth.
percolating.
Maybe I'll do it in parts.
In parts?
Yeah.
Do a little mini-series, perhaps?
Yeah.
Oh, well. It's good to have you back. Good to have you back, Adam. Thanks for being so professional. Let's hit up the USA. White House gives Canada more time to rework NAFTA. So more trade talk, guys. Pardon me. The Trump administration eased off its threat to exclude Canada from the North American Free Trade Agreement, extending talks that were set to end on Friday, while warning that the Canadians must be willing to accept the United States terms. Because I found it amazingly, uproariously funny when I saw the Canadian Foreign Minister on CNN maybe about a month or two ago actually threatening the United States with a trade war. And they said, oh, you know what? We're going to raise the tariff on Canadian whiskey, for example. And I thought, well, you know what? The bourbon manufacturers in the USA would probably be happy about that because it makes their product instantly more attractive. You know, after 4 days of marathon negotiations between the Canadian and American officials, 4 days. It's not really a marathon negotiation when you look at the Brexit, for example. Officials failed to produce an agreement. The White House told Congress that it would enter into a revised trade deal with Mexico and that it was up to Canada to decide whether to remain in the trilateral NAFTA pact. That's from the New York Times. Varun Prasad, does Canada have any clout here whatsoever in any kind of trade war scenario against the United States, or are they just going to have to do what they're told pretty much?
Look, they can have a say, I suppose, and their contributions can be taken into consideration, but when it comes to clout, I don't really think so.
No.
I don't think there's much that Canada has to offer.
Justin Trudeau's sex
Ouch.
appeal only goes a certain amount of way, doesn't it?
I mean, this is what Trump does, though, doesn't he? He goes and talks tough and kind of knocks everyone about and gets them thinking, okay, all right, we've got to rethink, our strategies. And that's pretty much what he did with the EU. That's what he's done with Canada. It's what he pretty much did with Mexico as well, really.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so...
it wasn't that long ago that the previous Mexican government was saying, we're not going to do anything about NAFTA. And then next thing you know, new El Presidente was more than happy to be on the phone and say, oh, yes, the relationship that we have with Donald Trump is just fucking magnificent.
Far left, by the way.
A
far left president.
That adds the thing that I recognised, if you watch a lot of Donald Trump's rally speeches like I do, generally, as a general rule, when he says something like, we'll see, we'll wait and see what happens, he was talking in regards to Canada's part in these trade negotiations. And he said, you know what, I'm pretty sure that we're going to get what we want to get. We'll wait and see what happens. As a general rule, whenever Donald Trump says, we'll wait and see what happens, he already knows that it's happening. I think he's projecting it forward.
Yes, some deal's going to happen.
Power.
But let's not forget that, it's in America's interest as well to have a trade deal with Canada. And it's in America's interest to have a trade deal with the EU. This thought that, okay, let's have a trade war and you're going to lose, which, the EU or Canada or Mexico would probably lose, that this would actually happen. This would have a damaging effect on the American economy. Like, let's not beat around the bush.
Oh, yeah. It may be a factor of a damaging effect, but it's not going to sink them.
It's not going to.
American economy is too powerful.
It's not going to sink them as fast, but it will hurt them to a point where they'll lose elections.
Well, again, it comes back to
and that's what
Was
matters.
just made on Periscope that it isn't about crushing; it's about getting a fair trade deal, right? And that's what Trump's always about. It's right. I mean, why should they? Why should they, accept everyone else's higher tariffs while they have to lower theirs?
Especially when they have, again, the position of dominance in the world economy, where they can bully people around to get the best deal for what they want.
Yeah.
No.
And that's a fact of nationalism. And I think if more countries did that, I think we'd be far better off.
But is he getting a good deal? And that's one of the things that.
Well, it depends on how you look at it.
Yeah.
If you're an importer exporter, you'd probably say he's a tyrant.
Yeah. Is he getting a good deal? Because something that you brought up earlier really is something that I've been thinking about for a while. These trade deals have been negotiated sometimes for decades. or parts of them, large parts of them.
Jesus, how do I get that job?
Yeah. They take a
30-year
long,
paycheck.
long time. And after a year and a half, suddenly everyone's crumbling. And the question needs to be asked here, are they really crumbling? I mean, Donald Trump has a lot to say about, how bad NAFTA was, how bad the trade deal with the EU is, how bad XYZ is. And then, he says a lot of things on Twitter. And then suddenly, after a few months, something that takes usually years to negotiate, it's all solved. And the question is, and the question here is Donald Trump one of those characters that negotiates hard, in front of everyone, puts this narrative forward that, he's a hard negotiator, he's going to get a great deal. And then at the end, he retreats. And I mean, an example of this is not in trade, but certainly in foreign affairs is...
Okay, well, let's not mix it too much. Can I just put a
It's North Korea in Singapore.
Okay, well, hang on.
He talked tough.
Well, I guess the first inference...
And then suddenly they were provoking North Korea with...
Well, let's stick
military.
with trade now, though, because of that point. So I guess the first inference that you're making is because it takes a long time to negotiate this trade deal, that it must be good. Because that's the implication here.
My
right?
implication
because, hang on. So if it's wrong,
if these aren't prolonged negotiations, then the concessions that Mexico or Canada or the EU are making are not that great.
Okay, so on the flip side, then, is the assumption that people who were doing these trade negotiations in the first place were doing so from a position that they were trying to get the best possible deal for America, or were there other agendas at play here? For example, I'll bring up once again, laboriously, like I often do, the Lima Agreement, which was signed in the 1970s, which was a UN document which had a lot of countries signed up to it, in which they explicitly state we're going to raise regulations and energy prices in the Western countries in order to facilitate a move of industry from the first world to the third world in order to raise up third world economies. And in the first world, we will then become renters rather than producers. And so if you're coming at trade negotiations for the last 30 years with that kind of mindset, then maybe 3 months is long enough to reverse it, because you can just use a little bit of common sense.
And that's fine. And now you can tell me how this new deal with NAFTA changes that.
Okay, well, how about this? You're asking if it's a good deal or it's a bad deal. Is it, first of all, a better deal?
Yeah. No.
Well,
that's fine.
There you go.
Yeah.
It's a good deal then, right?
Yeah, for America, yeah.
Because, I mean,
absolutely.
otherwise, if we kept going the old way, it wouldn't be a better deal. It'd probably get worse, If he's signed a better deal, it's a good deal. And that's the end.
Yeah,
that whole argument.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I've never had a problem with, the American people saying, we're not happy with the trade deals that we're signed up to. And basically, we're going to vote someone in that needs to renegotiate these deals.
That's your right as a free people.
That's your right as a free people. Hey, if you want to rip up NAFTA tomorrow, go for it.
Yep.
I mean, what I'm interested in is the consequences and these bigger picture, I guess, arguments that orbit, these questions.
Sure.
And I mean, and that's,
the nuance.
Yeah, when you talk about, the Lima Agreement and, there's been a lot of trashing of free trade agreements. Let's put it this way. Over the last few years, these are elites in the back negotiating. They have no mandate. Right? And they're negotiating on your behalf, and you've got no say in it. And my question is, I'm just asking questions here.
Yeah.
Is how is what's happened now different?
Okay. Well,
And my question and my answer, like if I could just answer my own question, is not much. I mean, these are just percentages. These are just 10% here, 5% here, targeted industries that Donald Trump can just for the 2020 campaign can just stand, in front of a rally, and he's got 10 bullet points
savage.
just to fucking
if he's got a
bang,
Prasad, the
bang.
rebuttal.
If he's got, you look at sort of the macro items of the trade talks, the big things, these are the targets we want. This is how it's going to work out between us, and that's when we're going to agree to deals. Fair enough. Okay, so it's a numbers game, right? These are numbers we want. These are the figures we want. Why it takes so long is because you got to adjust the figures, adjust the harmonization codes, in trade, the chapters like your China free agreements and stuff like that.
The currency values are constantly going up and down as well.
Yeah, to kind of fit into those targets. That's why it takes so long. So you might have your targets set out, and based on those targets, if it's agreed and signed on the dotted line, Trump can go out in public and say, we've got a great deal. It might take a while to, iron out the little nitty gritty here and there, which might take a decade, but that has to fit the targets that we've agreed upon.
But that structure, that NAFTA structure, or that free trade, multilateral free trade structure is still there.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't put you guys in this bracket, but there are a lot of people out there that are totally, gone, to use not a great term, but full retard when it goes to free trade agreements, and that this is just all that it needs to be teared down and stuff like that, which I'm in some ways kind of sympathetic to, like, but and that's really the problem that I just can't see. I can see an opening here for the Democrats to say he hasn't done enough in the future, in a decade or 2 decades. It might take a long time.
Yeah.
And there might be a growing frustration in a decade or so that, these changes, this New Deal hasn't really changed as much as, was promised.
Okay.
And what was promised?
Well, I think what was promised that basically the whole international trade structure was going to be abolished.
Upended. Well, to a large extent, it has been.
Well, no. Well, Donald Trump's...
There's definitely been a removal from power. Sorry to interrupt. There's definitely been a removal of power from like unelected bodies who dictate terms, like from the UN and whatnot. And, Donald Trump coming in, and you may say, well, it's just a little bit here and a little bit there. But that's essentially, that's parallel to like the Nancy Pelosi crumbs argument when discussing taxation, because $4,000 or $5,000 extra in someone's pocket at the lower end of the wage scale is going to be a lot more than crumbs. So obviously, if we can expand on that over, a national wireframe, then, these little bits and pieces around the edges might be huge for people like in the steel manufacturing industries, for example, the coal miners, for example. These are expanding, booming times now for them. And a lot of it has to do with, not being beholden to some unelected bastion of trade, godlike
global bodies.
That's
what they're against.
Yeah,
so,
well,
I mean, like my stance, and I think I represent a lot of the people who are, who the type of people that you may be referring to, that the whole system needs to be torn down.
Globalism.
Is
the
globalists.
globalists.
Not only globalism. Okay, look, globalism is a real bastardized term, but
it is.
Even free. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people, who are being cast in the light of, want to tear the whole, free trade thing apart. It actually boils down to bilateral trade and multilateral trade, and that's it. Now, I'm in the bilateral trade camp, right? Multilateral trade always results in international governing bodies impinging upon the sovereignty of, nations.
It's like outsourcing.
And bilateral trade is pretty much sovereign nations making their own deals with any country that they want. I mean, you can't get a freer trade than that. Multilateral trade is just a fanciful word of, putting rules on different countries, like the EU. Now, you're going to call EU a trading bloc, but is it really free trade when the nations themselves are beholden to the powers?
The EU famously has the highest tariffs, the highest borders for entry to market into the EU.
Within the
EU,
within the EU, there are subsidies and
within
all
the
sorts
EU,
of
but
quotas.
Can an EU member state now just on a whimsical say, oh, you know what? I'm going to go and make a trade deal with an industry in China. They can't do that, right?
Well, no, it wouldn't be. It wouldn't be no. But let's remember one thing here: that countries in Europe want to protect their industries too, and this is where it gets really difficult, because the EU is an open free trade area, like a lot of people do think.
Open within itself.
No, even within itself. I mean, French farmers are protected from other farmers within Europe. Polish, I know there were subsidies for a long time. I think they ended last year for milk producers in Poland that were under threat from other European. I'm not talking out of EU, but in the EU, they were threatened by French producers or whatnot. I mean, that's really the problem here, is that it's not just America that wants to protect its own industries. I mean, there's a lot of countries around the world that want to say, oh,
So they should, though.
Yeah, and so they should. And that's the protectionist argument. That's not the free trade argument.
It's a self-interest argument.
Yeah, it's a self-interest argument, and it's been around for ages. That's the thing here, that free trade is a new idea. I mean, protectionism is a very old idea. And, and that's not to say that because it's an old... No, I'm not doing the current year argument. But that's just to say that, that protectionism has been around forever. It's nothing new. And so...
there's always varying degrees of protectionism. Look, even in free trade agreements, you have at least 5% duty or something. The last time we got into a discussion about free trade versus protectionism, viewers of this podcast will know we ended up here for 5 hours and nearly killed each other. So I think we should,
I can't remember that one.
We'll have to. Well, neither can I, to be fair. We should one day just settle out. We'll set aside a 24-hour block, and then we'll have a marathon, quote unquote, 3-day
repeating
talks.
the same points.
We'll have talks and we'll finally get to the bottom of the protectionism versus free trade argument. I do want to move on here to the next article, guys, which is still on the same topic but just a little bit skewed. Leak City. Trump's off-the-record comments throw wrench into Canada trade talks. Presidents have come to learn that there is a great demand for their candid thoughts, their real feelings about topics that, in public, they address only with cliches and the same old rhetoric. Over the years, for instance, the White House press mavens have organised off-the-record chats between presidents and journalists, academics, policy experts, etc. Though participants are bound by the ground rules not to publish the president's thoughts, they can whisper clues about the goings-on to journalists who weren't in attendance. Now, Daniel Dale, Washington correspondent for the Toronto Star, is getting in on the fun. The headline of his piece, Bombshell Leak to Toronto Star Upends NAFTA Talks, in secret, so insulting remarks, Trump says he isn't compromising at all with Canada. The powerful gist of the story is that Trump isn't giving any ground in ongoing trade talks with Canada. However, he can't come out and say as much because, according to Dale's reporting, quote, it's going to be so insulting they're not going to be able to make a deal. Now, here are Donald Trump's comments. Here's the problem. If I say no, the answer's no. If I say no, then you're going to put that. And it's going to be so insulting, they're not going to be able to make a deal. I can't kill these people, he said of the Canadian government. Off the record, Canada's working their ass off. And every time we have a problem with a point, I just put up a picture of a Chevrolet Impala, Trump said, according to the source. Now, see, the issue for me is, guys, the comments in of themselves aren't particularly offensive or insulting, I wouldn't have thought. I can see why political, career political reporters would say, this is very bad and stuff. But from my opinion, those people tend to live in somewhat of a bubble where things are important to them and they're not necessarily important to the public.
Yeah, I mean, you might use the wrong spoon for dessert. You might use
the wrong spoon, exactly. Hoity-toity style. But see, Donald Trump made a point of this in his rally, and I think, we can open up the floor, but I think what this does is just further cement, like in a confirmation bias kind of way, it further cements the for me, the justified belief that people have that the press, for the large part, is, more interested in their agenda of damaging and with the hope of removing Donald Trump than they are in doing their actual job. They're merging the two. So their agenda has become, their job has become damaging the president rather than their job of, keeping to a certain level of ethical standard here. Because as we all know, when you have an off-the-record conversation with a politician or somebody in power, journalistic ethics decree that doesn't get printed. And the moment that you print that, you're really making it a lot more difficult for people in the future to have candid conversations with people in the press, and you burn that credibility, knowing that credibility is burned from that point on. So that guy who reported those off the record remarks, he knows from now on no politician is ever going to tell him anything in confidence, and he doesn't care because he saw it as an opportunity to hurt the president.
No, that's the price you pay, and he's going to pay that price. But I mean, I just put myself in his shoes. Let's say I'm Canadian.
Oh, I'm going to get him. I'm
Canadian. I'm a Canadian journalist. Some other journalist has told me about discussions what Donald Trump said. I'm Canadian. the free trade agreement with the United States of America is probably one of the most important things to happen in my country within the last 5-10 years. I'm going to report it. That the President of the United States seems to be saying that, he's not really participating in these talks in good faith, because that's what it really is, Sure. Well, he was saying, fuck Canada, Canada's a second-rate country. They'll basically do what we want them to do when the push comes to shove. That's the signal that he was sending.
Okay. Now,
to his voters.
Okay, well, the discussion we were having before the show, guys, was, is this Donald Trump 4D chess for Prasad? Because, if there's a way to let Canada know what you really think about them without... If he comes out and makes those statements at a rally or on the record, it's a completely different vibe. This way, you get the comments out there in the press, but you also get to be a victim of unscrupulous and unethical reporting, right? And it also helps with your narrative that the media is out to get me.
Yeah, look, it worked out in his favour.
Two birds, one stone.
It can work out in his favour. The thing is, now whether it's 4D chess or not, I can't really say. I mean. The thing is, do you think he would have known that this was going to get printed? Well, that's what I'm saying. I mean, it could very well have been like that, because he knows how the left-leaning media is biased against him. And Canada, we know, is a very left-leaning country, under probably the most left-leaning prime minister in the world at the moment.
Castro's son.
To be fair, to little writers, that they're not a left-leaning country. They're more conservative. Like, same with Australia, same with America. I think they're more conservative than they are progressive. But progressive governments get elected in these various countries because they hit like one or two issues, and that polarizes people, and then get people out to vote.
But yeah, look,
the baseline is progressive, conservative is what I'm saying.
Yeah, they're conservative in going out to vote.
Well, who's the opposition leader in the Conservative Party now? I mean, he's becoming very popular at the moment.
Well, because Justin Trudeau's awful.
Well, he's awful, and Australia's actually taken a page out of their book. Just a slight tangent. I think the opposition leader in Canada is very anti-climate change, and Canada and Australia Canada's cold Australia. Canada's cold Australia. Australia's hot Canada, pretty much. Right? Hot Canada. So anyway, look, putting all that. That would not go to print. And if you're telling yourself that Obama never made comments like that about other countries, you're kidding yourself. You're fooling yourself, because that's how politicians operate. That's why they call politics the theatre of politics, right?
That's right.
Because they're actors, they're players on a political theatre.
To us, the theatre happens to us, but backstage they're all,
background,
snorting lions and banging hookers, apparently.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, they were doing that in England. But, they're shaking hands with people who they're showing that they're enemies with. In the political theatre, you know what I mean? So they might have one way of saying things on front of the cameras, and another way of saying things behind the cameras. Now, it very well could have been that he was playing 4D chess, because you're absolutely right. Now, he can play the victim. He can say, "Look, see, guys, I told you. This is an unspoken rule. Anything that's said off the record, the media should not report on it. This guy has gone and broken that covenant."
The media has a habit since Donald Trump was elected, and, a couple of my favourites, like, say, your Brian Stelter on CNN, for example, saying that Donald Trump is damaging the reputation of the press because of this rhetoric he uses against the press. When on the flip side, I would say he's using that rhetoric against the press because of incidents like this, where it is clearly observably true, and that they're damaging themselves. And, I did I think it was like an hour and a half breakdown of Jim Acosta. I don't know if you guys saw it. It's called The Complete Deconstruction of Jim Acosta. And this is a guy who calls himself a White House reporter. And it's clear, like, if you actually listen to what he's saying, sentence to sentence to sentence, and break it down, he's not a reporter at all. He's an opinion journalist who calls himself a reporter. To take a brief example, he would say, it seemed like there was a cloud of confusion over the White House today as Donald Trump made statements about Russia. When a reporter would say Donald Trump made statements about Russia, someone's opinion is that this appears to be some kind of cloud of confusion. And I think this is if you can't observe those differences, and to be fair, most people don't. Like, you just absorb the language. You don't necessarily break it down as it's coming your way, right? Like, not many people can view it that way. Often you have to, either be like take a keen interest in rhetoric and language, or have some kind of writing education behind you. Okay, but if you can see that stuff, once you see it, you can't unsee it. And then for the press to come out and say, "Oh, well, it's all Donald Trump's fault that people are doing this to us," if you can't understand how that rhetoric is merging between reporting and opinion, I think you're now getting it because it's so overt. You're understanding it on like an innate level. Like, it just, sorry to go all snowflake, if you watch that shit, it just doesn't feel right. Do you know what I mean? You may not be able to identify the actual instances of the misleading and deception being used in the language, but you can actually absorb it. And it's just, there's something's happening in the matrix. Something is hitting me the wrong way about the way this is being presented, and it doesn't feel right. You might sense it on that level without necessarily understanding the mechanics of it, right? So, this idiotic move by this journalist, like, I wouldn't be surprised if he was getting called by other journalists who probably hate Trump twice as much as he does, going, "What are you doing? Like, do you understand how difficult this makes our job?"
There was a bit of consternation on Twitter. A lot of journalists trying to play it down from the White House press corps and all that type of stuff, because obviously this is damaging. But yeah, I just...
Do you think he did it on purpose?
Yes.
Okay.
I think he did it on purpose, knowing full well that somehow it would leak. Let's say it would leak.
The probability was.
Yeah, because if it's off the record, then okay, it's off the record, but you can still kind of get around that by saying, well, White House sources have leaked that the president's thoughts on this matter are X, Y, Z. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that, that basically they're playing hardball. And I think he wanted people to know, especially, people that voted for him, that, he's really negotiating hard with Canada to get the best possible deal for the United States. Now, will he scurry back from that and suddenly there's a deal 2 weeks later? We don't know.
Well, he's definitely not going to publicly lambast himself for the comments he made about Canada. In the speech, he doubled down. He said, "You know what? I'm right.
Yeah, I'm right.
They have to do what they'll have to come to the table. They'll have to give in to our demands."
Yeah, and what's happening in the background, we don't know.
And you know what he does? This is the other beautiful thing about Trump, the way he manipulates these.
He's not negotiating directly.
He's directing.
He's directing. He's basically saying to the negotiators.
He's putting pressure on them.
Yeah, but he's saying to the negotiators, let's get the best deal we can for the United States of America. But he's not at the table negotiating all these final points of this deal.
No, but what he does with those comments ads is put pressure on a government in Canada, which is already under big pressure, as Varun said, from the opposition, which is gaining ground daily.
That's right.
And he leverages them into a no-win situation where they have to do what he wants.
Yes, but this also goes both ways.
Okay.
It does. To us, if there is no free trade deal to take over NAFTA with regards to the Canadians, that is a big political problem for Donald Trump. There's no way to dress it up, in any other way. That if a trade deal doesn't happen with Canada, then it's not a good thing, and it's going to hurt him politically. And it'll hurt.
Do you think it would?
It will hurt Justin Trudeau, but Trump doesn't give a shit about that because no Canadians fucking voting for him.
That's true.
It's Americans that are voting.
What exactly do you mean? What's the point that you're trying to put across when you say that Trump is not personally there on the negotiating table making these negotiations?
Well, because sometimes when he talks about it, his rhetoric kind of signals that he's got his finger on the pulse here a lot more than other leaders do. And I just find it hard to believe. I think a lot of the White House and a lot of the negotiators, when it comes to these trade deals, are working around Trump. They're wrapping around their negotiations.
What evidence do you have of that? Honestly, or is this just a feel thing, like a gut feel?
Yeah, there's a gut feeling, and unashamedly so.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Yeah,
that's fine.
That Donald Trump, says a lot of these things on Twitter or publicly. And then a lot of very smart people in the background are wrapping around how can we maximize what he's saying. We can't control what he's saying.
That's right.
Yeah.
We're going to maximize to get the best benefits we can for this country for what he's saying. And sometimes it's uncomfortable. How can we make this obvious loss
fair
in establishment land into a win?
But isn't that always the case, regardless of the president? I mean, no president always sits down on every single negotiating table. They all have a view.
Yeah.
Because they're the president. This is what I want. This is how they might get into a little bit of the nitty gritty, but the team then negotiates.
I would say a lot of presidents in the past had a lot more polished
rhetoric,
knowledge when it comes to trade than Donald Trump did. Does
you know,
and that doesn't mean they're wrong.
I don't know that's necessarily true.
That doesn't mean they're wrong, or it doesn't mean that Donald Trump is right or wrong, or it doesn't.
Look, for example, what evidence do we have that a community organizer from Chicago better understands trade and international finance than a guy who's made $10 billion in those very areas himself?
Well, he definitely
know what I mean?
Yeah, well, he definitely knows what an originalist is more than Donald Trump does.
Sure.
When it comes to Supreme Court justice nominees. I mean, he's a lawyer, isn't he? I mean, and Donald Trump is not. He just adopted a list from the Federalist Society so he could get cred in the conservative.
But you're changing the topic there.
Of course, no, because the fact that Donald Trump, evidence. Show me a clip, 30 seconds, a minute of Donald Trump talking about trade, expanding anywhere beyond we're getting done on trade deficits, bringing up $69 million trade deficits, anything beyond that shows an element of knowledge about trade.
Okay, I'll put that in the homework pile and we'll address that next time out. And if there is something to be found in that area, and the guys in the chat room, if you know any of those clips, do send them to me on Twitter @BoogieBumper, and we'll have them dished up and ready to roll next time out. I do have a clip, though, however, if you're interested in this particular clip. Let's go to this one. It's only a couple of minutes long, guys, and then we'll get your comments, see what you think about this.
Today's Democrat Party is held hostage by left-wing haters, angry mobs, deep state radicals, establishment cronies, and their fake news allies. Our biggest obstacle and their greatest ally actually is the media. You can believe it. We've got stories that are so big and the media doesn't pick them up. We have stories that if that was about a Republican or a conservative, it'd be front page of every newspaper. And we have them and they just don't want to write them. It's a dishonest group of people. I will tell you that. You can have the biggest story about Hillary Clinton. I mean, look at what she's getting away with, but let's see if she gets away with it. Let's see. All I can say this, our Justice Department and our FBI at the top of each, because inside they have incredible people. But our Justice Department and our FBI have to start doing their job and doing it right and doing it now. Because people are angry. People are angry. What's happening is a disgrace. And at some point, I wanted to stay out. But at some point, if it doesn't straighten out properly, I want them to do their job. I will get involved, and I'll get in there if I have to.
Is that from the election campaign? Or?
No, that was that was 2 days ago. Right. So that's pretty strong language from Donald Trump from 2 days ago. And I think there is something to say about general frustration in the American public, especially on the Donald Trump side, in that, hey, this thing's been rolling on for 2 fucking years, and all we've seen is Paul Manafort, Cohen's office getting raided. We've only seen Republicans go under the pump. And, you know, a lot of this stuff, you know, the Clinton people have done amazing work. Charles Altel, for example, on the Clinton Foundation, if you've ever got a chance to read any of his shit, it is unbelievably in-depth, and you would be amazed to find somebody having absorbed that information who doesn't come away from the end of it chanting "lock her up" like somebody at a Trump rally. But putting that to one side, that's particularly strong rhetoric in a speech from Donald Trump. Now, I know he has spoken strongly about the Clintons in the past, but that was on the campaign trail, which is obviously for the objective of winning votes over your opponent. Once you're in government, there is a need for the president, you would say, probably at some level, to remain at arm's length and not getting involved in direct investigations, because this leaves you open to being called a fascist and whatnot.
No, because then you're doing what you're accusing.
Exactly.
Then
Exactly,
projection
because
game.
if you're going to be all about law and order, then you can't be a vigilante in order to prosecute those who break the law. So, but again, what he's doing here, I think, is not talking so much to the people. I think that was very much a message to the people within the government systems, like the bureaucracy, the FBI and the DOJ, saying, look, we're watching you, and this you know, again, sorry to double back. What I found is watching Donald Trump speeches, like I do, and I do watch a lot of them, when he says, like, let's see what happens. Let's see what happens. He already knows what's happening. This is a general rule of Donald Trump speeches. And the fact that he just pointed out there, Hillary Clinton, what she's getting away with, let's see if she gets away with it. Yeah. Let's see. And it's that confidence, right? Yeah. Exuding that confidence and that calm confidence. And I'm loath to do this. Like, I really am. And I'm loath to make kind of predictions.
You're going out on a limb here, are you?
I'm going out a little bit of a limb.
Yep.
It's only a very small limb. Yep. It's a very sturdy limb. But I will say, okay, I'll word it this way, and you could call me a cuck after the show. But I'll word it this way and say instances like that and rhetoric like that give some credence to people who say that there is some kind of investigation going on which doesn't get a lot of airplay, and which has been going on for quite some time, from, you know, people like Jeff Sessions, for example, into, you know, things like the Clinton Foundation and general corruption under the previous president's watch. And, you know, how that plays out, if people get arrested, I don't know. But, you know, for Donald Trump to make that particular statement, let's see if she gets away with it, I may have to get involved. That suggests to me that something is just about ready to pop. And what that something is, I don't know.
It's a very difficult investigation to conduct, especially now that we've seen that Nunes travelled to England and got absolutely no cooperation from the British intelligence service at all whatsoever, and they shunned him, you know, pretty much turned him away. So people are saying, you know, it's taking so long because Jeff Sessions is, you know, he's a weakling, he's got no spine, he's recused himself. I'd say that's part of it, definitely, because, you know, he shouldn't have recused himself. But...
Well...
He should have.
Yeah, I think he should have.
Why? Why should he recuse himself?
Well, okay, for a couple of reasons. One, you'll remember Lynch, what's her first name again? Loretta. Yeah. Sexy Loretta. She was accused, lambasted from pillar to post for not recusing herself by the Conservatives. So, you know, people would say, you know, like when that clip was playing, hang on, Az, when that clip was playing, for example, the mics were off, but you said, oh, whataboutism. Now, I have a lot of sympathy with the view of that take this stance. Yeah, it's whataboutism. So fucking what? Too bad. Right? You know what I mean?
It's necessary but insufficient.
That's right. He had to recuse himself from that particular perspective. That's one way you could look at it. The other way you can look at it is, if you want to maintain validity in a long-term investigation into your opponents, then the best possible way of doing that would be to be at arm's length from the investigation, which may or may not incriminate them at some point.
You've got to be squeaky clean.
Yeah, but now you've got a situation.
Sessions is a by-the-book guy.
He's maybe a by-the-book guy, but now
Trump
by recusing himself,
but he was perfect.
What
for the
he's
job
done
in that
is
sense.
given the DOJ, autonomous power, right? Because now usually there should be a congressional oversight into the workings of DOJ.
Yes.
The DOJ have now pretty much said, no, there's not going to be any congressional oversight. But, if, what's his name, Jeff Sessions was still in the scene, he could have forced that to happen, right?
Sure.
Yeah, so, I mean, by recusing himself, that's one power that they've got zero control over now. And I think that's a big, dent in their armor, I'd say. But look, I don't know. You guys have a fair point, I suppose. Like, it could have gone wrong for them if he was too involved. But if he hadn't recused himself, he didn't have to involve himself too much in the investigation. But, he could have come in those sort of instances where the Congress wanted oversight.
That's why recusing yourself is there on the table. I mean, it's just you're either in or you're out. This deal, I'm kind of watching from the sidelines. I haven't recused myself, but I'm just kind of like, watching from afar. That's why there's an actual term there that you got to recuse yourself, and the reason I remember he recused himself was because of some type of meeting or some brushing of the shoulders at some type of
He recused himself a few days after he got sworn in, right?
From the Russia investigation.
Because that's where he recused himself from.
Yeah.
I mean, from the Mueller investigation, because he had some contact with the ambassador or some...
Yeah, but in his capacity...
Some random Russian down the road.
Yeah, but no, in his capacity of being on a committee in Congress, I forget which committee he was on, but... a lot of politicians had contact with the same ambassador, in sometimes to the power of 10 than he did.
No, I suppose, yeah.
So
if
that
he didn't recuse
was
himself, he could have been caught up.
That
in
was
the
a red
turmoil
herring
himself.
No, and he was part of the Trump campaign.
Yeah.
Well, he wasn't part of the Trump campaign.
Well,
he came out in support of Donald Trump's campaign.
Yeah, but I
don't think he had I think he gave a couple of speeches, but I don't think he had some kind of role. In an official capacity.
Yes, but
he
that's
was definitely a surrogate.
That's a point that wouldn't be made in the media, where they would say that he was part of the Trump campaign.
Are you saying the media omits key facts for their
No,
agenda?
I'm saying that's what they would do, and then puts in question Sessions' objectivity.
Can Jeff Sessions fire Rosenstein?
Sure.
Yeah.
Can Jeff Sessions fire Rosenstein, or can he put any kind of pressure on him at all?
Absolutely,
After recusing himself,
I think Donald Trump can fire Rod Rosenstein.
No, he doesn't even have to go.
I think Jeff Sessions can recommend that.
Firing, yeah.
Okay. Well, because he is his superior.
Rod Rosenstein.
Right? He is his superior. Like Rod Rosenstein doesn't tell Jeff Sessions what to do. It's the other way around.
It's the other way around. He's the deputy.
Yeah.
Yeah, of DOJ,
Yeah,
right?
but firing...
He was recommended by Sessions in the first place.
But firing Rosenstein because...
Okay, not firing, but can he put pressure on Rosenstein
but
to say, look, these guys have to follow
firing
the rule?
Firing or pressure. If he recommends that Rosenstein be sacked because of his behaviour
No. Sorry. Let me just cut in for a minute. I didn't mean put pressure to fire him. I mean, can he put pressure on Rosenstein to ensure that the proper processes are followed, where if congressional oversight is required, that DOJ has to cooperate with that?
I mean, isn't that as I understand it, that congressional oversight is a problem for Congress. The DOJ can't necessarily say no. Well, fuck off.
Well, they shouldn't be able to, but
That's
they
their
have.
job.
But they have done that because the DOJ is a creation of the Congress, right? So Congress has absolute power over them.
We're straying a little bit off topic with that one.
Yeah, because that's a deep rabbit hole. There's so much to it. You could just talk forever.
Well, let's move on. Let's go to Florida. You wanted to talk about this one, Varun. DeSantis warns Florida not to monkey this up, and many hear a racist dog whistle. I'm amazed because I think most of the people who hear a racist dog whistle are actually people on the left who accuse him of being a racist by saying monkey this up, but put that to one side. Representative Ron DeSantis, who won in a thumping win against his establishment counterpart, you might say. Ron DeSantis was actually like 20 points behind when Donald Trump endorsed him, and he won by double digits, I think, in the final count. The Republican nominee for governor in Florida drew accusations of using a racist dog whistle on Wednesday after saying in a television interview that voters should not monkey this up by electing his opponent, Andrew Gillum, who would be the state's first black governor. That's why it's racist, apparently. Mr. Gillum, the mayor of Tallahassee, that whenever I hear Tallahassee, it reminds me of that zombie movie with Woody Harrelson. Zombieland.
That girl.
Zombieland.
Yeah, Zealand.
Well, that's what his name is in it. He's called Tallahassee. Won the primary election in an upset on Tuesday night, handing a major victory to the liberal wing of the Democratic Party. In the interview with Fox News on the first day of the general election campaign, Mr. DeSantis, 39, who has President Trump's support, attacked Mr. Gillam's candidacy by painting him as a far-left socialist. No, he's not painting him as a far-left socialist. He is a far-left socialist. See, this is the New York Times I'm reading from. Don't you see, this is what I'm talking about again, like we were talking about Jim Acosta. This is the kind of shit that these people do. Yeah. Oh, he's painting him as, he's suggesting he's a far-left socialist. No, he is a far-left socialist. He's just telling you like what we already know.
But he did dial it back, didn't he? Though.
Did he dial it back? I hope he didn't apologise.
I'm not a socialist. I'm a Democrat.
Oh, yeah, Democratic socialist.
No, Democrat. Yeah,
we were having a little bit of a discussion before we went on air about the general rift in the Democrat Party, Varun. And I'll just make this point quickly and then we'll open up the floor. I've made it before on another show. For me, this is... Okay, so I made a bigger point before, but I'll boil it down because people have already heard it. The problem is, right, so if you're in the Democrat Party and you if you've been taking the bait of the mainstream media and other influencers for the last couple of years, you are now of the belief that there is a pseudo beginnings of a Hitlerian dictatorship in the White House, okay? And you're like, this is fascism and we need to do everything we can to stop it. And if you look at the Democrat Party, you see a bunch of moderates and you can turn around to them and say it's your fault that Donald Trump's in office because you weren't socialist enough. And I think in an act of desperation, people are reaching further to the left and picking up these people who have more aggressive policies, more aggressive rhetoric. And, you know, because what's the best way to fight fascism? You unleash the communists, right? You unleash the communists to defeat the fascists because the moderates are just going to go along with it. Right. You know, and if I can put myself in their way of thinking, that's why I think you'll see like these moderates are being tossed out in favour of the harder left people, because the harder left people are selling the idea that, you know, if you come further to the dark side, we can defeat, you know, the fascists in the White House right now. We need to defeat the racists and the Nazis and, you know, those capitalist pigs. And the only way we can do that is by going absolutely hardcore socialist. You know what I mean? So I think there's an element of that going on. What do you think?
Well, I'd kind of disagree on that point a little, because socialism is a hard thing to sell, right?
To sell?
To sell, yeah, to voters. And I think if they're going to...
Sorry. Yeah. Well, wasn't there a poll lately that, you know, over half of, what is it, Americans?
About 60% of Democrats think socialism is a good idea. And
good
about
idea?
30% of Republicans think socialism is a good idea.
Well, I'll just step away now. So. Just had to.
Mic drop.
Really?
Yeah.
No, like legit.
There was something
like
ridiculous like
Are
that.
you kidding?
No.
No.
Okay, well then, I don't know. The point that I'm about to make then is almost moot. But what I was going to say, socialism is a hard thing to sell. But if they're going to say now to the moderate Democrats, see, it's your fault that he's in power, Trump's in power. I mean, that could have a two-pronged. That could have a negative effect. That could have the effect of moderates saying, "No, actually, you guys are going crazy now."
Well, they're trying to do that,
and this could splinter the Democrats in the long term.
Joe Lieberman, for example, wanted to. He wanted the guy who was beaten by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in New York. He wanted the guy who was defeated by her to run as an independent against her, which would be fantastic for the Republican nominee because that's splitting the Democrat vote 50-50, and he sails to victory if that happens. That would be absolutely wonderful for the Republicans.
So there's no doubt, like there's a massive socialist uprising in Democrats. I mean, you've got Cynthia Nixon as well, who's running as a socialist.
Oh, did you see that debate?
It was a spat.
Oh, it's fucking unreal. It was beautiful.
Did you see it?
No, I didn't.
Oh, it's definitely. Oh, you've got to watch it.
Cynthia Nixon sounds familiar.
Yeah, Sex and the City. She was the lesbian on Sex and the City.
Yeah.
So
Nice.
she was the least talented, least attractive one of the four.
But look, this is sort of Bernie Sanders
Just wanted to go.
socialist faction of the Democrat Party, that could be either good for them, or it could be their downfall, I'd say.
It's not going to be good for them.
It could be good for them if, like what you say, is it's going, they're reaching further out to the left and then sweeping in the moderates towards the that side of the Overton window. If that works out for them, that could be good. But I kind of disagree because I just don't see it. I think at some point, I mean, I haven't lost my faith in humanity to that point where
Really?
I see the moderates going, yeah, no, you're right, we're going to become completely socialist.
No, that's
now.
not going to happen.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
That's not going to happen.
I'm more inclined to believe that in the long term, Democrats are shooting themselves in the foot. Now, looking at Florida as a case on its own now.
The Cubanos.
And we were just talking about it. Yeah, that's right. The Cubans. I mean, this guy is a socialist, right? Everyone knows him as a socialist.
Oh, what are
Even
you,
though
big
he
fan
did
of
say-
Castro? Great.
Yeah, exactly. You've got all the Cubans in Florida. They're not going to vote for this guy. Now, DeSantis went and said, we don't want to monkey this up. And the media, the Democrats have jumped on this because they're covering for the fact that there's no way that they can sell a socialist policy to people who have, fled from socialist countries and know damn well what it's like, to live in these countries. So they're going to jump on this racism bandwagon and just drown out anything.
Because this is
with
all they
racism,
have.
Because they have nothing else to say. How else are they going to sell it? So the best way to sell it is just to make the other person look so bad that the alternative just has to be good. Has to be better.
As a general rule, lads, if I say to someone, oh, don't monkey this up, and your mind jumps instantly to I'm making a reference about racial prejudice, for example, aren't you the one that's being racist at that point?
Yes.
Because it's about what's in your heart, isn't it? Like where the comment comes from. Isn't that what matters?
Yeah, well, without, it's in
Without
my
going
heart
too
or it's-
touchy-feely.
Yeah, but
context is important, isn't
yeah,
it?
context is important, and in conservative circles in America, there is no, people were shocked that this candidate was even accused of this because quite obviously that's not what he meant.
Yep.
And
We said a flurry of great things about his opponent before that comment.
Yeah, but
That's
that
completely
doesn't matter.
thrown by the wayside.
That doesn't matter when you're a communist.
yeah, and then
Come on.
instead of just saying how it is that that this is nothing and let's move around this, he doubled down and said it wasn't a dog whistle, it was a bullhorn or something like that. Something really stupid.
Yeah. So, James, the guy I co-host with on Trust and Verify, he actually said this will probably win DeSantis the election. Because, I think we are at the point now where more and more people are just not falling for this garbage. This might have worked 5 years ago to come out and say, oh, the guy's clearly racist comment. And you know what? 5 years ago, he might have hung his head in shame and with his tail between his legs and say, I'm stepping down. I'm sorry. Do I offended everyone? And just go off and drift off into the ether. But nowadays, I think the cynicism is so high for this kind of, if they're going to say dog whistle, I'm going to say it's like an idiotic cat calling where like, oh, there's a racist over here.
Yeah.
Woo, racism. People aren't falling for it anymore.
No.
And that's a beautiful thing.
Hey, you're right. I mean, this would have worked 5 years ago because I would say somewhere between 2012 and 2013 was when all this, just fucking diarrhea just came out of nowhere. You know what
Rhetorical diarrhea.
I mean? Yeah, it just came out of nowhere. And look at like Mitt Romney. Remember, they called him a racist.
Yeah, yeah.
You remember? And he lost the election.
Yep.
They called him, he wants to keep women in binders or something, some kind of comment like that.
No, he wants to be presented with binders full of women.
Yeah, it was some kind
jobs.
of comment like that. And it's kind of like in that era, 2012 to
says that?
2013 is where it all kind of just went, down the gurgler.
Went down the gurgler.
Just a few things about Florida.
Okay.
Lowest unemployment rate in the top 10 states.
Is it?
Yeah, top 10 richest states in America. Lowest tax state, I believe.
One of
the the big states that is the lowest.
That's
tax.
why all the retirees.
And that makes sense.
From New York, which is the highest tax.
There you go.
Yeah, and now
Getting higher if you watch that debate too, by the way.
Now we've got a democratic socialist I like to call a pinko.
Very subtle. Do you want to recuse yourself from that characterization?
Absolutely not. I claim ownership of that comment. And, basically on par, like the polls say, it's 50-50. The initial polls, I'm sure they'll sort themselves out once we get closer to the thing. But things are good in Florida. Big picture. And... there's a socialist that's on 50%, and I don't really know if this is there's a lot of euphoria in the populist right about what's happening. Political correctness is going down, things are looking good, but I'm not so sure that there's been a massive dent in socialism as an economic theory.
Gee, there should be by now.
Yeah, and I don't think I think
that's because the socialists control the education system.
Yeah, well, that's the reason for it. But I'm just saying, let's not all start jacking ourselves off.
Yeah, fair enough. I want to move on to Alex Jones, guys. Alex Jones. It's got a little bit of age on it, this article. This is nearly a month ago now, but we haven't been together for nearly a month, so fuck it, let's do it. Twitter under fire for refusing to ban conspiracy theorist Alex Jones. I love that headline. Twitter is being accused, you're evil, Twitter, for not banning somebody. Twitter's CEO Jack Dorsey is defending his decision not to ban far-right radio host Alex Jones. He's not far-right at all. He's definitely more in the libertarian mould. I mean, if you listen to him for 5 minutes, if you can get past the ranting and the raving, which I'm sure triggers a lot of people into not listening, but if you actually listen to what he actually believes, he's not far-right at all.
Well, I remember him, bagging out George Bush when George Bush
absolutely.
was president.
The left loved him then when he was criticising
Yeah.
George W. Bush, despite Facebook, YouTube, Apple and Spotify terminating his accounts. Because all of those people banned him, you must ban him too. Jump on the left-wing censorship bandwagon, comrade. Twitter is facing heat for deciding not to ban far-right conspiracy theorist Alex Jones from his platform, breaking ranks with Facebook, Apple, Google, YouTube and Spotify, all of which have banned him or removed his podcast. The company is resisting pressure to follow suit, clarifying that Jones has not yet broken its rules. We welcome everyone to express themselves on our service. Sometimes these expressions may be offensive, controversial and or bigoted, Twitter said in a blog post on Tuesday. I guess my main issue with this is and I think this is fair, I don't like it when people characterise this as a free speech issue. And the reason I would say it's not a free speech issue, although I agree with the sentiment, which is you got to separate the technicalities of what free speech is and the sentiment of what free speech is. I agree with the sentiment that Jones's free speech is in some way being curtailed and or suppressed. However, this is not a free speech issue because he's free to walk out and stand on the front porch and talk to whoever he likes. Where I do think there is a problem here for these companies is they present themselves, because since they introduced monetization, they present themselves as a gateway to a marketplace. Now, if you're banning people from accessing a marketplace due to the fact that you don't like what they say or their opinion, and you can't necessarily prove that they have broken some rule of the marketplace itself, which these guys haven't, because those companies are also governed by the Constitution if they're American, right? So they can't invent their own rules like that go against American law, right? And one of the laws is, in regards to free speech is, if I run a company in America, I can't, do things that go against the Constitution in the running of that company, correct? So what they're doing then is, they've created this access to a marketplace and they've stopped his access to that market. And so there's a financial argument here in that they're unfairly impeding his potential for earnings by, acting in a way which is unconstitutional to it.
So
does that make it's a very muddled point?
No, they're blocking his opportunity when others who fit the mold have opportunity to do exactly what he wanted to do, but because he doesn't hold the same opinions, that's
right.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, absolutely.
With like an arbitrary decision.
What market are we talking about here?
Well, because YouTube, for example, you can sell
content creation.
Content creation, which was created by YouTube.
Well, not necessarily. People have created content before the internet.
Yes,
okay.
and so, but if they create content before the internet,
they've harnessed content creation.
It was up to them to get it out. Mm-hmm. You go to a publisher, you go to a TV network, you go to a radio station, and what happens? I mean, let's think about it this way. 20, 30 years ago, internet didn't exist. Well, we're getting old now, so 30 years ago, 40 years ago, not the internet that we know today anyway. If you wanted to start a newspaper, or if you want to start a newspaper now, free speech, yeah?
Yep.
You want to start a newspaper?
Try.
Yeah. You go to a printing press place or a company, and you got to have $100 million fucking tort insurance just in case you get sued.
Yep. You have to comply with various regulations.
Absolutely. And the question is why? Why? Because if you don't have insurance, then if you defame someone and they go after you and you don't have anything in your pockets, they'll just go after the printing press.
Yeah.
Now, the same thing happens for YouTube, and that's a kind of a separate issue. But, you know, at the end of the day, if YouTube doesn't want you on their site, that's their call.
That is their call. And
that's horrible. And if I own YouTube, I'd have everyone on.
Here's the thing.
There wouldn't be a ban button on my
right.
on my website.
There would be no report button.
There would be no report button. If you
There
don't
could be
like
a
it, don't
block
watch
button.
it.
If you don't like it, you can block.
Oh,
the
if
person.
someone's
Fine. Go
throwing
for it.
crap
Yeah.
at you directly, then that's something I can understand. And let's remember what the internet is. Everywhere
It's supposed to be the Wild West.
Yes, it's supposed to be the Wild West, but there's always been banned features. Forums, let's go back to forums.
Yeah.
Let's go back to IRC. Let's go
ICQ,
ICQ. Various chat rooms.
Yeah.
You could always ban someone if they didn't like what you said.
Can I just pull you up on one point though?
Sure.
You made the comparison between a printing press and social media, right? Now, a printing press owns those articles and owns the opinions it does. Now, is that to say, you know, if you're going to compare, say, Twitter to a printing press, that means Twitter now owns all the tweets and is responsible for the tweets.
That is the price of free, Varun.
No. But what I'm saying is now, because we have seen a lot of anti-white racist tweets
On the board of editors for the New York Times. Miss, what was her name?
Oh,
Jong?
Jong. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
We've seen a lot of that shit, right?
Yeah.
So now is Twitter responsible for that, and are they now liable if someone wants to make, you know, a case?
Yeah.
Because you could make it against the printing press then.
Of course.
So why isn't Twitter now?
Well, the very easy fix to that would be, instead of these companies saying that they are responsible for the content that is on their platform, they would say that each individual poster is responsible for their own content. The problem in that case is, though, that they can't make money off it, because in order to make money off it, they have to claim ownership by the fact that it's posted on their site.
Let's go.
It's a very murky area here now.
No. Let's go back to foundations here.
Yeah.
What was the problem with the internet? What was the problem with Google?
Not enough porn.
And well, you can never
That
ever
problem
have enough
solved.
porn. But what was the original problems that, you know, companies like Google and YouTube had it, and that was making money. Now, traffic means you need servers. Servers cost money, heaps of money. It's not cheap.
Actually, it is very cheap for companies like YouTube and Twitter and Google because, well, Google owns their own services, but for companies like YouTube and Twitter, they get it at a really, 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 really reduced rate that other people can't compete with, which is part of the reason why it's so stupid to say, hey, just make a new YouTube, because the infrastructure, it's like trying to say to someone, build a new railroad system in the 1700s.
Yeah, because their traffic is so great that, of course, you get it at a lower rate. I mean, if I go, you know, if I go by,
yeah, but there's also been like
if I go by 10,000,
for Facebook, for example, there's also been clear documented involvement and favourable deals done with the government and whatnot, because these entities were almost government run for a large section of it. So, you know, it's not a pure free market thing here.
No,
There's
I'm
been
not saying it is.
favourability and regulations and access denied to market for other people.
No, it's not access denied, because if you try and set up a service by yourself, 200 let's pick an arbitrary number here.
Sure.
500,000 people, you know, want to jump on you, and you want to set up a server at your house and stuff like that, and we're talking
In the bathroom?
volume. Yeah, I mean, it's a costly thing. It really is, and it's not for everyone. That's you're not going to give me, you know, tens of thousands of dollars to provide me with servers and UPSs, and you know the firewalls and the DDoS protections that I need. You know how much that hardware fucking costs? That's not freedom of access. That's not accessible to everyone.
Sure.
Now, you can put up videos on YouTube or on Periscope, and you don't even have to fucking worry about that.
That's true.
For free. Now, there's
they benefit because you're creating content that gets more traffic, right?
Yeah, but you're benefiting because you're getting your shit out
It's a
there.
symbiotic relationship, though.
That's right. So, I mean, that's why...
Now, see, if I could interrupt.
Sure.
This is where the argument falls apart, though, Adam, because Alex Jones is one of the most massive draw cards on these platforms. Millions. He had 5 million subscribers on his YouTube channel. Now, it's a symbiotic relationship in that people create content, which creates traffic for the site. So the content creators get eyeballs and the site gets traffic. So everybody wins. Now, on this occasion, if that were true, then Jones would be promoted because he is without doubt one of the biggest content creators on that platform. However, this shows that this is ideological and not a free market decision, because they're banning one of the biggest draw cards because they don't like what he's saying.
No.
I
So
don't
at
think
that
they're
point,
hiding the fact that this is an ideological decision. I mean, they've come out and straight up said, like, we don't like what he says. This is hate speech, and we're shunning him from our platform.
That's why Alex Jones was on there for so long. And they came to a point, basically, where they had to make a call. Is the benefit that we're getting from Alex Jones outweighing the cost? And I'm sure they got some very smart people out there that, they're not gonna hemorrhage their business model just to fuck Alex Jones.
people do though. Like Dick's Sporting Goods, for example. I was listening to Dan Bongino this morning. Dick's Sporting Goods with the AR. Sorry to change tack, but just an example of companies hurting their business. Look, Target, for example, in the US, when they said, "Oh, we're going to have the transgender bathrooms," that smashed their business model because people boycotted. Dick's Sporting Goods has admitted in their own forward budget committees and stuff that this is actually losing them money, taking this political stance, this ideological stance. So it happens all the time.
Yeah, but
And hopefully the free market buries them.
yeah, and with all respect to Dick Sporting Goods, these aren't businesses on the same level as
Google,
or YouTube.
That's fair.
Or Twitter or Facebook.
5 million viewers. I mean, what does that do to the income stream of Google and YouTube? I mean, YouTube is Google, isn't it? It's Google owned.
Yeah, it's owned by Google.
So what
See,
does it do to Google's income stream, really?
I think if we can, we're free market guys here, right? And we're capitalists, okay. But I think if we can put that to one side just for a second, just to, if we can acknowledge the point that there is undoubtedly a level of, I don't want to use the word collusion, but there's definitely a level of these tech companies at the top working together in order to block this guy out. Yep. So your Spotify's, your Apple. Apple refuses to let the Gab app on because it's a competitor to Twitter. Yep. So they are obviously working. 25 companies within 24 hours all banned him at the same time. Yep. That is not an accident.
That's conspiracy.
That's conspiracy. Now, there have been companies here in Australia, and maybe the laws are a bit different, but when companies, like there was an example with Visi, right, the recycling company, and they were... I forget the term, but they were working with their competitors to price fix.
Yeah, that's illegal.
That's illegal, right? Now, surely when these various companies are working together to lock somebody out of, accessing the marketplace and basically turning them into some kind of pariah, isn't there options here? And that's why I tend to think that Donald Trump mentioned it in his speech. Did you hear that part of his speech? He's like, we're going to look into it. These people are banning conservatives because they don't like what they're saying.
That's scary.
No, without changing.
But they might be breaking the law here, and nobody's taking them up on it because they're so these tech companies are fucking powerful behemoths.
Yes, they are, and
you can go broke fighting them.
Well,
yeah,
they own the internet, and I remember back in 1997 or 98, it was
95% of traffic is through
Bill Gates wanted to buy the internet. He wanted to buy the rights. Anything.
That's a great example of everyone thought that Microsoft was going to take over the world, and it just fell through the floor.
And there was a court case because they were a monopoly and they actually got broken up. So they separated Microsoft from Windows, did they not?
No. The Internet Explorer. From the Windows.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so they broke it up. Could the same thing happen here to like a Google, for example, or a Facebook or a YouTube?
Well, it seems to be headed in the same direction, doesn't it? I mean, in terms of the issues that popped up in that court case.
Yep.
Which, if you really think about it, and
antitrust.
we live in the common law system, and so, obviously America does too. They should go back to that, court case and see the precedents that were laid there and see how it applies to Google.
See, that's the thing. None of us like I don't want any kind of regulation on the internet. And I think if you do introduce regulation, then eventually it's only a matter of time until that regulation gets used to shoot you in the face, right? So
it strengthens Facebook. It strengthens
exactly.
Google.
I don't want to see any of that.
I don't really want Trump to put his fingers into it too deep or put his hands.
It's not about
too
Trump.
Deep.
He can just guide the conversation.
It's a shit idea. It's not about Trump. It's not about if Trump comes out with let's do regulation or an internet bill of rights or these ideas that are floated around. that is regulation. That's got nothing to do with Trump. It's just a shit idea. And I mean, if you don't know why, read a book.
Okay, let's stay on the same topic, but we'll move on. You wanted to talk about this short clip from Tucker Carlson. Let's have a listen to this.
Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon, is worth about $150 billion. That's enough to make him the richest man in the world by far, and possibly the richest human being in all of human history. It's certainly enough to pay his employees well, but he doesn't. A huge number of Amazon workers are so poorly paid, they qualify for federal welfare benefits. According to data from the nonprofit group New Food Economy, nearly 1 in 3 Amazon employees in Arizona, for example, was on food stamps last year. Jeff Bezos isn't paying his workers enough to eat, so you made up the difference with your tax dollars. Next time you see Jeff Bezos, make certain that he says thank you. What about the Walton family? They founded Walmart. Collectively, they're worth about $175 billion. That's more than the entire gross domestic product of Qatar, the oil-rich Gulf state. The Waltons could certainly afford to be generous with their workers. Instead, they count on you to take up the slack. In 2013, taxpayers sent more than $6 billion to Walmart's employees for food stamps, Medicaid, and housing assistance. And if you think that's remarkable, meet Travis Kalanick. He's the youthful founder of Uber. His personal fortune is close to $5 billion. His drivers, by contrast, often make less than minimum wage. One recent study found that many Uber drivers lose money working for the company. That's not a sustainable business model. The only reason it continues is because of your generosity. Because you're paying the welfare benefits for Uber's impoverished drivers, child billionaires like Travis get to keep buying bigger houses and more airplanes. He's someone else who owes you a thank you note. If you can think of a less fair system than this, send us an email. We'd love to hear about it. This system is indefensible. And yet, almost nobody ever complains about it. How come? Well, conservatives like us support the free market, and for good reason. The free market works. But there's nothing free about this market. A lot of these companies operate as monopolies. They hate markets. They use government regulation to crush competition. There's nothing conservative about that, just as there's nothing conservative about most big corporations. Just the opposite. They are the backbone of the left. Pick a left-wing cause that you think is hurting the country. Check the donor list, and you'll find the name of some corporation, often many corporations. Corporate America enables the progressive lunacy you see every night on this show. They are funding the revolution now in progress. That's exactly why liberals say nothing as oligarchs amass billions by soaking our middle class, because they've been paid off. For example, you probably assume the people who founded Walmart were conservative. Most of their customers certainly are. Yet the bulk of the Walton family backed Hillary Clinton in the last election. They gave the Democratic Party more than $700,000 during the 2016 cycle. Almost every billionaire in Silicon Valley did the same. In return for that, they got immunity from criticism, and they got to keep forcing you to pay their employees. It was a good deal for them. There is one person in Washington who is offended by this arrangement, and we're sorry to say he's wrong on pretty much everything else. But this is a weird moment in American politics, so you take allies where you can find them. Bernie Sanders, of all people, is trying to get your money back from Jeff Bezos. This is especially amazing since Bezos is on Bernie's side on most things. They're both left-wing activists. But on this question, Bernie is right. He's planning legislation that would force big corporations to return the taxpayer-funded welfare benefits you have paid to their workers. It's not a perfect solution, and it's unlikely to pass. No matter what they may say in public, liberals in Congress would never support something like that. Their loyalty is not to you, it's to Uber and Jeff Bezos and the rest. But at the very least, legislation like this might awaken a sleepy population to the new reality of activist corporate America. And that's a good thing. America has changed enormously in the last 20 years. A lot of people you thought were your allies are in fact working against your interests. They have contempt for you and your family, your customs, and your faith. Included in this group, I'm sorry to say, are a lot of big corporations. They have no use for you or the country you grew up in. Stand in their way, and they'll crush you. You're watching it all around us all the time. It's shocking, so shocking that I recently wrote a book about it. It's called Ship of Fools, and it explained what happened, who did it, and why. The book is out in a month, the first week of October, but you can pre-order a copy now, and I hope you will.
Okay, Eds.
Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon.
You wanted to tear this thing apart. We're on. Go for it, man. The floor is. I've got a couple of thoughts after watching that, but I'll let you guys go first and see where we end up.
Well, I think.
Calm down. Well, doesn't he make some decent points there? Like, see, okay, let me see if I can give you a launch pad, all right? So
drag me in.
One of the things I've argued for a long time is, at the top of and this gets shunned by a lot of free market people, but I think it's observably true. At the top of the corporate ladder, there is a situation where you have these kind of hardcore people, like, let's put it this way. At the top of the ladder, it's capitalism for them, and competition is a sin. Like, we don't want competition. And what they actually push forward there for the public is socialism for the rest of us, which keeps people equal in the dirt, to steal a line from Yuri Bezmenov. So they want all of the riches. They want to control the markets. They want the monopolies. They hate competition. They hate free market. They love doing deals with governments to get favourable lower regulations for themselves and pump up regulations on their competitors to pull up the drawbridge so nobody else can compete. They love getting subsidies. They love getting, tax subsidies. They love all that. And then they want the exact opposite for everybody else.
I don't disagree with that.
Okay.
My problem was right at the start, that Uber drivers are being forced. Uber drivers are losing money. Now, if you're working and you're losing money, you're a fucking idiot. Okay? Now, I don't know how I can fix that, or who's supposed to fix that. What would someone want me to do with that? Like, I work and I'm losing money. Well,
maybe stop spending less on various things.
Get a fucking different job. Yeah. I mean, if we're getting to a stage where, where people you have to roll out the red carpet.
This isn't compassionate capitalism again, is it?
Yeah, exactly. Roll out the red carpet. Here's a job. It's going to pay great. And, and all this type of crap. The first minute and a half of that video, or whatever it was, when he was in that mode, was just totally unacceptable. And he does make some decent points later on. I don't think there's a problem with people being concerned with monopolies. Although we have to be very, very careful on what we do to stop that from happening. I mean, one way to keep monopolies in charge is by more regulation.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the problem is, who's in favour of more regulation here? And that definitely is Bernie Sanders. It's the left. It's Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders suggests that we should attack monopolies by further regulation, and that's how you solve the problem.
And minimum wage is a regulation.
And minimum wage is a regulation, mind you. That's another part of the new trade deal, that Mexican workers have to earn a minimum wage.
Is that right?
So it's like America imposing socialism on Mexico.
Oh, lovely. Well, he is a socialist president, isn't he, in Mexico? So he was probably in favour.
Who, Trump or anyway?
Savage.
Ouch. So, I mean, that clip really does, I don't know, grinds my gears to no end. And you know why? You know that first minute was just hell for me. I just.
For Prasad.
I reckon it's ridiculous what he said.
Care to expand?
Yeah, like, you got to blame the system. And again, it's the governments, okay? If a person's earning such less money that he has to go and get welfare benefits, you take away those welfare benefits, right? There's less taxes being paid to the government. Their wages go up. It's a very simple equation. Why the hell would a working person need social welfare benefits? That means systemically there's something wrong with the so-called free market that you're referring to. Now,
systemically, that word that gives me shivers.
Yeah, I know. But it's very true. It's very applicable in this sense because there is a systematic problem.
What is it?
The systematic problem is that there's a fucking system in the first place. There should be no fucking welfare. There should. Okay, I mean, I understand there should be maybe a little bit of welfare,
like
to
a minimal,
very
safety
minimal,
net.
yeah,
like
minimal.
Yeah.
But if you've got a job, you should not be
Wow. Look, the evidence in that clip is he says 1/3 of Amazon workers were on food stamps. Well, then are we saying then that 1/3 are being paid below the poverty line, or are we saying 1/3 are really irresponsible with their expenditures and their debt and
A
whatnot?
bit of both. It's a bit of both, though.
I would say that, you know, if that 1/3 of those workers wouldn't have a job, probably, if it wasn't for Amazon.
You got to look at that side.
And,
How many jobs?
and they'll be taking bigger welfare, social security welfare checks after that. I mean, you know, this is not such a massive thing. There are people out there that work part-time and still receive some benefit from the government. Now,
Sure.
That shit should be taken away. Of course, like, I mean, I don't want to do it now. Let's do it now.
Okay.
But
I think, you know, to be pragmatic, just to give a little bit of pushback on that,
sure.
to be pragmatic, I think, you know, if you can at least just say you can halve the burden on the taxpayer by someone, you know, getting a part-time job, maybe they can't have a full-time job or something. If we can bring that taxpayer burden down, I think that's, you know, essentially it's a better thing. It's not a good thing, but it's better than, you know, just being 100%
and that's
funded
really
by the rest of us.
Yeah, that's what's happening at Amazon, really.
Okay.
But if a person is working a job and getting food stamps, right? Like you said, is this person just irresponsible? Well, this person's irresponsible in the sense that they don't want to, or they haven't made. Oh, look, maybe I shouldn't say it, but have they made the effort?
You've gone there. Come
do
on.
it. Have they made the effort to make themselves more marketable in the employment market? You know what I mean? Like, there are other jobs to do.
Well,
go out there and get them.
I'm afraid if you're on minimum wage for 40 years, that's exactly what you deserve. You know, you're supposed minimum wage is supposed to be an entry level to the next level.
That's right.
Like my first job was working at McDonald's.
Yeah.
I was there for 8 months.
Yep.
Then I got another job, and I was there for 4 years. Then I got another job, and with each job, either my conditions or my pay has increased due to the fact that I now have more experience.
You got skills.
I've got skills to bring. If I go back now and work at McDonald's again, I'm going backwards, right?
Yeah.
So, and if this is correct for like a simple blue collar lad such as myself, then it's essentially correct. So if you find yourself working minimum wage for the next 35 years, I would suggest that you haven't done enough to acquire new skills, train in new areas, or acquire enough knowledge, or maybe you're just not motivated to do that. Maybe you're happy. Maybe you're happy to just go in and flip
you're smoking
burgers.
a quarter day.
If people don't want to apply themselves yet, right, and you're creating a culture where you're creating a victimology culture and saying that, you know, every society's to blame for my problems. Look at this big tech company. It employs me, it gives me a job, but it pays me such minimum wages that I've got to go and get food stamps and, you know, survive on other people's tax dollars. Well, maybe we should look at cutting those tax dollars. Because then you're going to be forced to apply yourself. Yeah, and let's be honest here. The reason Bernie Sanders is using this as a crusade is because he would see this as a backdoor way of raising the minimum wage. Like, so he would be saying Amazon workers and Uber drivers aren't getting paid enough. And rather than saying we need to cut regulations and do the free market option, he would follow that up by saying we need to raise the minimum wage, which would, of course, as a necessary condition of that, mean that less people are hired because the companies are having to pay more for the people that they already have, and they're going to have to let people go.
Well, for Amazon, it's obvious. They would just turn to automation. I mean,
that's a really good point. Can I just tie that up with the other topic that we were talking about when we were saying there's a bit of a splintering going on in the Democrats?
Yep.
Now, I'm sure the Democrats are looking at Bernie Sanders and that whole rising faction and thinking to themselves, this is so dangerous right now because, like we said, like Tucker Carlson was saying, these big corporate, head honchos, they're all in the list of Democrats. You know, they're on this charity, they're backing, lobbying for this. And if he says that, you know, we need to raise the minimum wages, and that's attacking, that's pretty much, you know, that's not going to go down very well for these big corporations. And that's not going to be very good for the Democrats then, right? Because these corporations at some point are going to say, man, how much of this can we take?
Yeah,
you know,
well.
and we saw that in Seattle. I think they wanted to raise the taxes on Amazon,
correct,
and Microsoft, and they almost threatened to leave the state.
That's right.
And you know what happened? That tax policy just fell through. I think it was the homeless tax or something they were calling it.
That's right.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a little microcosm of...
Just funny, just because you mentioned homeless, it just reminded me of something I watched in the debate. And I think Jake is still in the room. Jake runs an account on this app called Total News Network, and he rebroadcasted the debate between the two Democrats just for shits and giggles, for a bit of laugh. And you actually had Andrew Cuomo saying there, because the argument was about homeless shelters. And he's saying, no, the homeless shelters are incredibly violent and people get raped and people get killed in there. And I'm like, wait, did the incumbent politician just admit that people are dying in his own homeless shelters? Like this is a debate tactic now?
You know what,
people are dying in my homeless shelters. Vote for me. It's like, wow, this is new levels of stupidity.
My
here.
favourite part was the one that everyone's talking about at the moment, where he goes, can you stop interrupting me? And she goes, can you stop lying? And he goes, I'll stop when you stop. So now we're listening to two idiots lying.
If you want laughs, watch a Democrat debate. Final article here, guys, and then we'll work towards wrapping it up. We've been going for a couple of hours, a bit of a marathon. Donald Trump warned to keep away from Senator John McCain's memorial service. I don't know if he has to be warned to keep away. Who would want to go to that fucking thing, to be honest?
Democrats.
Congressional leaders have saluted John McCain today as a model of service in war and peace in a memorial ceremony at the heart of the political battlefield, where the late senator fought for more than 3 decades. Afterwards, thousands of fellow Americans who had lined up outside the US Capitol in Washington, D.C. in stifling heat, those troopers began filing past in the majestic rotunda to say goodbye as McCain lay in state. McCain, the Arizona senator who died Saturday aged 81, was remembered as a man who inspired other leaders even as he vexed them with a rebellious streak and impish humour. Wow, isn't that fantastic? My initial thoughts about the whole McCain thing, not specific to anything like McCain or his family or his death or anything like that. My initial thought was it just shows the fickleness of the Democrats, who for the long time have presented themselves as being a kind of anti-war party who stands up for the little guy. Here you have in John McCain a guy who was a warmonger who wanted, massive increases in the surveillance state with the use of things like the Patriot Act. He wanted to send American sons and daughters to die in foreign conflicts that they have no business being in the first place. And now, because he's anti-Trump, he's held up aloft as some kind of hero and beacon of, role model that apparently Democrats... I mean, he could have become president, in my opinion, if he had have run as a Democrat now. If he was running now as a Democrat, they'd all be voting for him, with the exact same policies. So
it's a big call, but I get where you're coming from.
It's not a far stretch.
No. Yeah. Okay, what are your thoughts, Adam J?
Well, you got to separate two things. John McCain as a war hero, which he undoubtedly is. I'm not American, so I'm not going to,
Is he?
Yes, he is.
Where did he get that nickname, the Canary, from?
Well, because he squawked while he was tortured, wasn't he? Yeah, well, look, there's people that know...
details.
That know details about torture and those who don't. I mean, there's a myth out there that, the unbreakable prisoner that will never break, Rambo.
Songbird, sorry, it was not canary.
Songbirds or canaries that, never breaks under torture. Everyone breaks under torture. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just a matter of time, of when.
Yep.
Everyone breaks. He was in a bad position because he was a son of an admiral, I believe, of the Pacific Fleet at the time.
Yep.
So of course he was a target.
Prize.
It was a prize, and they offered him quick release. He said no because apparently they've got a system of that. You got to be in a line, and he wasn't up for being released, so he was down the line, and he stayed, and they didn't like that one bit, and they tortured the fuck out of him. Now, so there's that component, someone to look up to. Even young people need to look up to him in America. I mean, again, I'm not American. I've got my own war heroes.
Sure.
And then there's the political. He went into politics. He decided to go into politics. And if you go into politics, there are, everything's on the table. And in some utopian world, we could say that, his military service makes him immune to any type of criticism, but that's not the case.
That's definitely,
and it shouldn't be. That just because he was tortured and stuff like that, that doesn't he was in politics and he has to himself divide that part of make that distinction from his career. And, John McCain had his ups and his downs. He was the great loser to Barack Obama. This is why the Democrats like him. This is partly about Trump and more about Obama, that John McCain didn't go hard against Obama.
Mm-hmm.
He was
I think he was put up there to lose, to be honest.
Yeah, we can go down that rabbit hole, but let's keep it at a place that, this is a guy of immense character, I guess you could say, that really didn't like dirty politics. I mean, he was a victim of it himself. I mean, with his daughter, his adopted daughter.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, one of the funniest things about the whole reaction to this was Karl Rove expressing his,
oh really,
his condolences,
compassionate Karl.
Yeah, when it basically, it was Karl Rove that put
disgusting.
out the story that
Right.
that his adopted daughter, I think she was from Sri Lanka or Bangladesh, was basically because. I don't even want to say it's that disgusting, like even for me. Yeah. So I mean, some of the reactions been over the top. Some of the reactions been, the problem with John McCain is that he was a neocon when it came to foreign affairs.
Oh yeah, and a hawk.
A hawk, and he believed in this flawed idea of spreading American exceptionalism around the world. We're spreading democracy around the world.
Yeah, they don't want your democracy,
and
John.
they don't want his democracy. They never wanted it, and this is something that a lot of Americans got sucked into. And it's kind of still display at times. Yeah,
okay.
That was his biggest fault.
And a lot of people made a lot of money by doing it. The big, the Halliburtons of this world.
Oh,
for
yeah.
example.
And good old Dick.
Yeah, Dick. Varun Prasad, John McCain.
Look, let's not forget, this very same media that's putting him up on a pedestal. Look, actually, right from the outset, I don't want to say anything too bad about him because he has just passed away,
Oh,
but,
no, we don't do that on this show. Go nuts. Tear in.
Yeah, look, couple of things I just want to say. Firstly, the same media that's putting him up on a pedestal, saying that this is a role model and blah, 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 all this sort of stuff. It's the same media that a few years ago was calling him a fucking racist, and that, if he gets into power, we're going to go back decades and whatnot, so what's happened to the media? Again, was the media lying then or is the media lying now?
Well, they're always lying.
They're always lying. Absolutely.
One way or another.
Secondly, so he's a war hero because he got caught, he got tortured, and, he had the chance to go, but he said, no, I can't leave if all of us can leave. And look, it's a noble thing to do.
It's a very interesting story, some might say. Some might say. Very convenient story.
Detect some sarcasm there. But anyway.
Skepticism.
Look, the thing is, if it was me, I thought the more logical thing to do would be you now know their secrets, why don't you take off, get a band of people to come and break out the rest of the crew.
Sure.
But, that's just me.
Okay.
He was a warmonger. Mm-hmm. This guy, the Crimea and Russia thing, it wasn't too long after that he was already
calling Rand Paul a Russian spy.
He was already in Montenegro trying to expand NATO powers, Yep. And he knows damn well what could result from that. And that's just his latest. That was just a few months ago.
Yeah.
And so
it's a long list.
Yeah, it's a long list. So I'm just picking on that one, because it's kind of fresh in my mind. So this is all about the more praise you give to McCain, the more you're attacking Trump. That's all it's all about.
Yep, I think that's fair enough. Any final thoughts before we do wrap it up, guys, or have you had enough? Adam J.
No, I'm all right.
You're all right. That's great.
No, I was just thinking, do I want to hammer McCain more? I'm like, no, not really.
We'll keep the hammering for
I will say that Donald Trump's comments on John McCain
during the campaign
were probably one of Donald Trump's. I thought
they were fantastic.
I think for Donald Trump, he knows himself. He went over the line when it comes to these comments.
Really?
Yep, I do.
Whose line?
Just line of decency.
He got elected.
He got elected. No, but
a lot of his base hate John McCain.
Hey, I can, I was going to say something really, really bad. I can get elected, but it doesn't. I have to be happy with myself, with how I acted. Yeah, you could achieve something in your life.
I think he's okay with what he said about.
No. But I think that it's, put it this way.
Not a fan.
It didn't get him anything. It didn't get him any votes. You know, not one person voted for Donald Trump because he said the truth about John McCain. No, not one.
I bet we could find one. That's a low target. I think we can find one. Find two. Okay, I'll do my best.
Periscope?
Varun Prasad, any final comments?
No, look, it's always sad when someone dies, I suppose.
Is it? What about Hitler?
No. Well, what about Stalin?
What about Stalin?
But look, I've heard things about him, like he was
Joy.
He was a very. Let's just end it up on a positive note for McCain, because
he's not Hitler.
Yeah, because
that's a positive.
You want to end on a positive. You want to end on a positive note for John McCain because nobody's been doing that for the last week.
Well,
like, let's be different.
I listened to Derek Hunter.
Let's be different and blow smoke up his ass and say how good he was.
Well, look, I listened to Derek Hunter, and he pretty much hates John McCain's politics.
Okay,
but he says he's didn't know him personally, but every time he met him on the in the floors in Washington DC, he goes he was the most kindest, gentle person, and always willing to help the people who he had no idea who they were, the smallest people. So
that's great.
Yeah, that's a good thing.
Very trained him well.
Wonderful. Ted Dabrowski on Twitter.
Yes, sometimes here and there.
Sometimes. Varun, who are you this week on Twitter? Do we know? At the Discotheque, I think.
Yeah, that's
Spelled
I've got
accurately.
another Twitter handle, but I won't just share it.
You're not going to reveal it. You can catch me at Boogie Bumper. Follow the show on Twitter at TCD Tweet, and also thecommondiscourse.com. Check out the podcast on iTunes, The Common Discourse. Thanks everyone for joining us in the chat. It's been an absolute pleasure. Tom Chatelet put in capital letters. He seldom writes in capitals. I loved when Trump called out McCain's BS. So there you go. There's one. We found one.
Is that why he voted for Trump?
Is that why he voted for Trump? That's a very different question indeed.
It is.
Well, it's been fun, guys. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you again real soon. Until next time, stay calm, stay rational. God bless, and have a good one. Bye-bye.
Aloha, James R. here. When I'm not in court defending the boys from the starting block against slander charges...
Alleged!
Yes, alleged. I'm hosting Trust and Verify with Boogie Bumper every Sunday night at 1 a.m. on TAVshow.com. Join us and all your favorite broadcasters there.
TAVshow.com.
Friend and foe alike, join me, Varun Prasad, every week on the Common Discourse Weekly Roundup podcast. You can follow the show on @TCD Tweet on Twitter and Periscope. Subscribe to the show on YouTube, Stream Me, iTunes, or your preferred podcast platform. If you like what you hear, or you would like to express your raging discontent, please consider leaving us a review. The Common Discourse, independent political opinion, thought, and analysis for the people, by the people.
Do you lie awake at night pondering life's big questions? Is there a God? What is the meaning of life? How would one do an hour-long sports show without ever actually talking about sport? If yes, we can help you answer 33% of these pressing questions. All you have to do is check out the starting block on TAVshow.com, Periscope, Stream Me, or YouTube, Wednesday mornings at 3 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can also download the podcast on iTunes just by searching for The Starting Block in the store or at thestartingblock.podbean.com. Or if you're really desperate for answers, why not check us out on Twitter at The Starting Block. No K at the end, don't forget to drop that K. Enlightenment is now only a click away.
Now that is a freaking awesome commercial.